Hey, warmer friendly hello! Welcome to lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peterson, now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. We've got an excellent podcast for you. We are not going to be doing a recap or any sort of a guest interview. We've got one last big Saturday today in college basketball. Obviously not as big as ones that we've had over the last 2 months, but we still have 92 games on the betting board. That's 92 sides and totals to be able to make money on. So we're going to take this podcast today to give you guys picks and analysis on all these games on the Saturday board as we hit some bank shots. You're going to get a little bit over 3 hours of picks and analysis, and this will be the last one of these for the years. Then we go from there back to having the guest interview, the recaps, and everything like that. I always have a line of demarcation of about 70 games when you just leave it exclusively for picks and analysis like this one, so hopefully you enjoy it, and then we'll be unpacking the weekend on the podcast tomorrow and getting you guys, of course, always the picks and analysis where we go in Las Vegas rotation order as per usual. So I'm going to be going with the bigger games are outside of conference tournaments first, and then it goes pretty much at tip time by these conference tournaments, except for the smaller ones are going to be at the bottom. The smallest ones are going to be the Atlantic Sun, the Northeast Conference, and the America East. Those go at the bottom. Those will be in the final segment. We're going to start off with the normal Las Vegas betting board games here in the first segment, and then we'll go conference tournaments in segment number 2, the Coastal Conference, the Southern Conference, Missouri Valley, Metro Atlantic, Sun Belt, Big Sky, Summit, West Coast Conference, Ohio Valley, and then we go in there, the extra game. So if that sounds convoluted, do not worry. If you're listening on Twitter/X, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, wherever you get the podcast, I actually list the order of the games in there because I know that it gets very, very convoluted this time of year with non-conference games, conference games, and then conference tournaments. So there's all of that taken care of for you. And if you ever do have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you do have one of two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at gunit_81. Keep in mind, letters CM, they mean does not matter. So as per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it's very much appreciated. And then from there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review. And I did not get in any Twitter/X questions today. We've got a lot to break down here on the podcast today, and let's get into it. Picks and analysis on every game on the betting board as we hit some bank shots starts right about now.
Most financial establishments close at a certain time, but not here. It is time for a side and total on every game on today's betting board bank shots.
And we start with 601, 602. Arkansas is going to be on the road against Missouri. Missouri is a favorite here of 1.5 points in some spots, other spots a 1.5 point underdog, and your total on this game, it is between 160.5 to a 161, and I do like the over. I did set my total here at a 164. You've got an Arkansas team that's absolutely looking to gun it. They're a top 30 team in terms of total possessions per game, and Arkansas just in general has been able to do a nice job thriving in offense. They're a top 20 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, and you do have a Missouri offense that has been a whole heck of a lot more efficient when they've been at home rather than away from home for this Missouri team. Still a top 55 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, and for Missouri, the big reason why I do have to set them as an underdog, I'm going to be willing to take Arkansas in this spot, is that Missouri is really giving it up from three-point range. Teams are shooting 36.5% from three-point range against them. That is 323rd in all of college basketball. Meanwhile, you've got an Arkansas team that has done a nice job guarding the three-point line. Teams are shooting 31.6% from three against them. That is a top 50 mark in the country. Now, they are getting a bit land-based down low as it is a Arkansas group that is outside the top 240 in terms of opponent's two-point shooting percentage, but Trevon Brazile has been able to do a nice job in terms of having contributions for this team. He throws in there 13 points, 7 boards from three-point. He's shooting about 35% from three. Darius Acuff continues to be incredible, 22 points. He shoots 44% from three. Malik Thomas shoots 40% from three, 15 points per contest. And then on the flip side for Missouri, it's been the Mark Mitchell show for them. He's been able to do a nice job being able to throw in there about 17 points, 5 boards, and Gene Stone gives you 13.5 points, 5 rebounds. The only two guys on the roster that give you double figures for Missouri. They've been pretty solid on the inside. Top 40 team with their 2-point shooting percentage. Top 55 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. But also if they're in a pressure spot, they do shoot just 68.5% at the free throw line. That is outside the top 300 in all of college basketball. And if Arkansas needs to close this game out at the charity stripe, they've been shooting more than that, about 74.9%. So like the over, so my total 164, before, and I like Arkansas here, whether that be laying a 1.5 or taking them on the money line as an underdog. 603, 604. Houston is on the road against Oklahoma State. Cowboys, who find themselves as a underdog of 12.5 points, 148.5 to 149.5 is the total. I am in on the under. I did set my total at a 147.5. I have a Houston team that continues to be one of the slowest teams in all of college basketball, 325th in terms of total possessions per game. Now, Oklahoma State is absolutely looking to gun it. They are 6th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, but it's not as if this Oklahoma State team has been amazing on offense. I'm not going to call them terrible or anything like that, but I mean, for Oklahoma State, in terms of points per possession, they're about 108th in all of college basketball. Houston has been 43rd, mainly because they've been a great offensive rebound team. They're a top 20 team in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound. Not necessarily the world's greatest shooting team, even though Milo Suzan in conference play is shooting over 40% from 3 points. You've been able to have a pair of guys step up in a big way. Kingston Flemings, Emmanuel Sharp, these two guys give you just under 33 points per contest. And then you've had Joseph Tugler lock things down low. He and Chris Senek have been able to combine for about 13 rebounds. Between the two of them, you get about 17 points per contest for a Houston team that continues to be a top 5 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. If you do need Houston to close out at the free throw line, they shoot 77.5% at the charity stripe, and they've been good with regards to both opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage, being in the top 55 in both of those. They continue to be a top 20 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, and with Oklahoma State being outside the top 225 in terms of turnovers per possession, that does hurt them. You've got Anthony Roy, though, who's been able to supply for this team 16.5 points per game. That's big. Now, Parsa Fala, it looks like he's out for the season. That hurts them. That's their number 2 scorer. So now they're looking to a little bit more of a small ball lineup. Victorious Miller, Jalen Curry, these guys combine for about 21.5 points per game, but I do think that Fala's absence is quite big in this spot. I did set my line at 12.5, so I'm going to be waiting on a little bit of line movement. I was seeing a 12 out there before. 12 or less, willing to lay with Houston. 13 or more, take the points with Oklahoma State, but you're at the 148.5, 149.5. I'm going to be in on the under. 605, 606 Butler is going to be on the road against DePaul. DePaul between a 3.5 to a 4.5 point favorite. Totals between 141.5 to 142.5, and with DePaul could only make them a 2.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take the points. Now, it's a ball team that has actually been very good on defense. In terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, they are 56th in the country. Butler, not so great. 182nd in the country in terms of total possessions per game, but I do think that with Butler, they're going to be able to win the battle on the glass. Butler ranks 77th in the country in terms of percentage of missed shots that become an offensive rebound. In games played away from home, that does ascend into the top 40, as Michael Ajayi is going to be your best rebounder in this game. 16 points, 11 boards. Doesn't shoot it well from 3, but that's why you've got Finley Bizjack and team shooting 34% from 3, 86% the free throw line, 17 points per contest. You've had Jamie Kaiser throwing there 9.5 points, 4.5 rebounds per game. And then on the flip side, it's a DePaul group that has been able to get quite a bit down low out of one Mr. NJ Benson, 11.5 points, 7.5 rebounds per game, but he's pretty much a lone guy on the roster. It gives you over 4.5 rebounds per game. CJ Gunn, 13.5 points per game. DePaul has been outside the top 210 with their 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. If they get put at the free throw line, they shoot just 69.5% at the free throw line. They've been outside the top 235 with regards to taking care of the ball in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis. Now, Butler, not necessarily a team that'll put you under too much duress, and for DePaul, they're strong down low. They're a top 55 team with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. They are hovering right around 300th in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, though, as well, and I do think that that's enough for Butler to be able to remain lively. Going to be a little bit of a tempo war here as well. Butler 66th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. DePaul 243rd. So I'm going to be willing to take the points here with Butler, set them as an underdog of 2.5 points, made a total of a 140.5, so 141 plus. I'm going to be in on the under. 607, 608, Notre Dame is going to be on the road against Boston College. Boston College is a home underdog of 1.5 points, 139.5 to 140.5 is the total line for Boston College. I did set them as an underdog of 2 points. I'm willing to lay the 1.5. You have a Notre Dame team that has not been great on defense. They are well outside the top 150 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but they don't allow second and third chances. It's a Notre Dame group that is allowing teams to grab only 23.9% of their misses as an offensive rebound. That is 21st in all of college basketball. And for Boston College, I wish I could put it any other way. They can't shoot. They're not a bad defensive team. They're 96th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but outside the top 275 in terms of 2-point shooting percentage, outside the top 325 in terms of both their free throw shooting percentages and 3-point shooting percentages. Jalen Harrelson, he is back for this Notre Dame team as well. Main scorer with about 16 points, 4 boards, 2.5 assists per game. Came off the bench in the previous game, but he looks all good to go. Brendan Shrewsbury, Cole Kurta, these guys combine for about 25 points per contest, and both of these guys shoot it well from 3, especially Shrewsbury at 40% from the outside. Now, it is a Notre Dame team, though, that they only shoot about 69.8% at the free throw line. That's outside the top 250, outside the top 200 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis on offense as well. But with Boston College, just flat out, this is a team that's not getting a lot going on offense. Haven't been able to guard the arc well. They're a top 55 team in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, and you do have Fred Payne, the Payne train, give you 15.5 points, 4 boards per contest. Donald Hand, 12.5 points, 4.5 rebounds for Boston College. They're not really doing a ton on the glass. They're just outside the top 180 in terms of overall rebound percentage. I think that they're going to be able to remain lively with their defense, but just can't trust them with this bad offense. Semi-total 134. I like the under, and with Notre Dame, we'll only lay up to a point and a half with them. 609, 610. Virginia Tech is going to be on the road against Virginia, and Virginia does find themselves as 11.5 point favorites. So on this game, it is 146.5, and with Virginia, I did set them as 11 point favorites. So 11.5, that does become my buy point on the Hokies. You do have a Virginia Tech team that has been a mid-tempo team. 146th in terms of total possessions per game, with the Cavaliers are more around about 221st, and for Virginia, the Cavaliers, they've been able to do a nice job on the glass. Top 10 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage. They're not allowing a lot of second and third chances as well. Teams grab about 26% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound. That's a top 85 mark in the country. And Virginia Tech, they are 275th, with teams grabbing 30.5% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound. That does improve to the top 120 when they're away from home, though, and much of that was without Toby Lual. Lual has been able to do a nice job down low, 12.5 points, 8 rebounds per game. You've got Imani Hansberry supplying about 14.5 points, shoots 35% from 3, and got some good three-point shooting with this Virginia Tech team. A top 75 team with their three-point shooting percentage at about 36%. Jaden Schuett is able to shoot about 40% from 3, give you 8 points per game. And then on the other end of things, you've got Thaddeus Ritter, who's been able to give between 15 to 16 points per game, throws in there 6 boards, so he's been able to do a nice job here. Malik Thomas is supplying about 12 points per contest from 3-point range. He shoots about 33.5% from 3. Jakari White has been your main guy from the outside, shooting 44% from 3-point range. For Virginia, they're just doing the little things well. They've been a top 10 team with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, top 40 team in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, and they're one of the best shot blocking teams in all of college basketball. Ogana Onyesu, Jonah Grunlow, they combine for about 5 blocks per game between the two of them, but it is a team that's been a little bit shaky with the offense here recently. They're not going to put you under duress, and with Virginia Tech having Nicole Savadeus being able to protect the ball, I think they do just enough to hold in there. I did set my line at an 11, so willing to take 11.5 plus, and then I did set a total of a 143, so at the 146.5, I like the under. 6'11", 6'12", Davidson. So on the road against St. Bonaventure and the Bonnies, who find themselves as 3.5 point favorites. 141.5 to 142.5 is the total. Set the Bonnies as a 3.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay up to 3 with them. Davidson very much looking to slow things down, 354th in terms of total possessions per game. Not a lot on the inside with Davidson as well. They don't have a single guy on the roster that gives you 5+ rebounds per game. Not getting completely destroyed on the glass, but the forte of this team is clearly their 3-point shooting. They've been a top 40 team, knocking down over 37% of their threes this season. Robert Blums has been that top scorer with about 12 points. He shoots 42% from 3. And then Parker Fredrickson has been a 44% outside shooter. He throws in there 11 points, a little bit over a steal per contest. For Davidson, they've been relatively okay in terms of taking care of the ball, top 100 team, in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, but needs to be pointed out. If this team is in a pressure spot, they shoot 65.8% at the free throw line. That is well outside the top 350 in all of college basketball. And the Bonnies have been a relatively good offense. For Davidson, 172nd in terms of points per possession. Bonaventure is 100th, and for Bonaventure, it's just been a case where they have not guarded to save their lives in games played at home. Outside the top 285 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, they are giving up some second and third chances. Teams grab about 27.2% of their misses as an offensive rebound, but I have to love what you've been able to get out of Frank Mitchell. He's come in, give the team 16.5 points, 10.5 boards. Good to be able to win the battle down low. Daryl Simmons has been throwing in there 89% free throw shooting, 16.5 points. He shoots 43% from 3. Bonaventure, even better than Davidson with their 3-point shooting percentage. You're just a hair above 37% from the outside. In games played at home, that's about 37%. Away from home actually is a little bit higher, but I do think that for this Bonaventure team in a pressure spot, them being able to shoot 75% of the charity stripe, that does just enough for them in what I think is going to be a low-tempo game for Bonaventure. But during 12th in terms of total possessions per game, so made the Bonnies a favorite of 3.5 points. Going to be willing to lay up to 3 with them, and I do like the 142.5 to the under. Semi-total at a 141.5. 613, 614. Xavier is going to be on the road against Villanova. Villanova is a favorite of 11.5 points. 154.5 to 155.5 is the total line. For Villanova, I did set them as a favorite of 9.5 points. I'm going to be willing to take the points. Now, it's a Xavier team that has actually done the little things quite solid. They are 67th in the country in terms of defensive rebound percentage. Teams are only grabbing about 25.6% of their their misses as an offensive rebound. Villanova's given up a lot of second and third chances. In games played at home, teams who grab 30.1% of their misses as an offensive rebound. That's outside the top 255 in the country. Now, Villanova is shooting 37.5% from three-point range at home, but in games played away from them, they are certainly giving it up from three-point range. As for this Villanova team, right now they're about 153rd in terms of their three-point shooting percentage defense. That goes up to 35.4% in their games played at home. Xavier, they allow opponents to shoot about 34.3% away from home, and Xavier's been a top 75 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. Villanova neither here nor there with generating turnovers, and their top scorer in non-conference play, Bryce Lindsey, has taken a little bit of a fall off, down to about 12 points and 2 assists per contest. Heather Perkins, Arcaden Lewis, these guys combined for about 26 points per game, and you've got Perkins shooting 35% from three. Devin Askew's been that main three-point shooter at about 42.5% from the outside, and have to love Duke Brandon, give you about 10.5 boards, 12 points per game, but pretty much a lone guy on the roster that gives you over 5.5 rebounds per game. Meanwhile, for Xavier, you've got Trey Carroll caroling all the way to 18 points, 5.5 boards. She's 34.5% from three. Jovan Mimel-Selvich has been able to shoot about 43% from three. He throws in there about 12 points per contest. Phil Brankoven has been able to give you 86% free throw shooting, 10.5 points, 8 boards. For Xavier, doing the little things very well. I think he's going to keep them in and out. Xavier is outside the top 275 with their 2-point shooting percentage, so that's a little bit of an issue, and I do think that that's going to help you out to stay under, so I did set my total at a 147.5, like the under, and I'm going to take the points here with the X-Men. 6:15, 6:16, Louisiana Tech on the road against Delaware. Delaware is a home underdog of 1.5 to 2.5 points, 132.5 to 133.5 is the total line with Louisiana Tech. Set them as an underdog of 2.5 points. I'm going to be willing to take Delaware on the money line. Now, Delaware's not giving themselves second and third chances. Bottom 10 team in terms of offensive rebound percentage, and Louisiana Tech has been a unit that has been overall relatively solid with their interior play, but they do give it up from the outside. 233rd in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage at 34.9%, and it's a Delaware team that the one thing that they've been able to do a great job of this season is be able to pop it from three. Delaware overall is outside the top 200 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, but they shoot 39.4% from three-point at home. That's the top 30 mark in the country. Louisiana Tech, 362nd in terms of overall three-point shooting percentage. They shoot 24.2% away from home. That is 365th out of 365 teams, and if this goes to the free throw line, Louisiana Tech, they are shooting as a collective 65.6%. That is a bottom 10 mark in the country. DJ Dudley, 14 points. He shoots about 38.5% from three. He's a lone guy in the roster that shoots about 33% from the outside. AJ Bates, Scooter Williams have been able to combine for about 22 points per contest, and then on the flip side for Delaware, they are having a tough time in terms of taking care of the ball. In terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, they are outside the top 225, but do have Justin Fernandez, give you 17 points, shoots 88% of the free throw line, 41% from three. In Delaware, in a pressure spot, they shoot 78.5% of the free throw line. That is a top 20 mark in all of college basketball. With Delaware, they've been honestly a relatively good interior defense as well. They're a top 155 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage with Tyler Hauser, 14 points. He also shoots above 80% of the free throw line, throws in there about 5.5 rebounds per game. Christian Bliss, 2 steals, 17 points. He shoots 40% from three. I think that Delaware, with their 3-point shooting, could be able to find a way to get the job done in a slog. Both of these teams playing very slowly. Louisiana Tech, 315th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Delaware is even slower at 345th. So set a total of a 128.5. I do like Delaware here on the money line, and this total under 617, 618. Georgia Tech is on the road against Clemson. Clemson is a 17.5 to a 16.5 point favorite. 143.5 to 144.5 is the total. Set a line of 16. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Georgia Tech. Now for Georgia Tech, they have just been a wreck in terms of taking their care of the ball. They are outside the top 280 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis. If you look at the overall offense, they're outside the top 255 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, but they have been able to do one thing well, shoot it well from three. They're shooting from three-point range right now about 35.1%. That's both at home and away from home, so top 115 mark in the country. Absolutely gunning it, by the way. 31st in terms of total possessions per game, and Clemson, looking to slow things down, 324th in terms of total possessions per game. Clemson, not necessarily doing amazing in one thing on offense. They've been shooting about 34% from three. They've been relatively solid on the inside, and it's just really a whole is greater than the sum of its parts approach when it comes to Clemson. Right now, your top scorers are Jay Godfrey, 12 points, 5 boards. Then you've got Carter Welling from there, chipping in there about 5.5 rebounds, 7.5 points per game. Clemson just does not give up second and third chances. Top 30 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage. Top 65 team in terms of opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. Clemson, country average team in terms of their free throw shooting percentage. I do think that this number just a little bit too lofty to cover, even though it has been a Georgia Tech team that, well, let's call it what it is. It has been less than savory for them recently, and Georgia Tech after a pretty strong start to the season on defense. We have seen things just go straight down the toilet bowl for them in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They're right around about 142nd in the country, but they give up about 15 points more per 100 possessions away from home rather than at home. You still do have Bain Dongo, who's been able to give you 12 points, 8 rebounds, 2.5 assists per game, and then Kwasi Reeves, 15 points per contest. From three-point range, he's been able to dial it up at about 38.5%, and then you've got good versatility out of Lamar Washington, 10 points, 5 boards, 5 assists, 2.5 per contest, but doesn't give you a whole heck of a lot from the outside. The turnovers, I think, are going to be a little bit costly if you're taking a look at this total. I did set mine here at a 142, so along with taking the points with Georgia Tech, I'm going to be in on this 143.5, 144.5 to the under. 619, 620, you've got UConn on the road against Marquette, and Marquette does find themselves as a home underdog of 8.5 to 9.5 points. Balanced game between 142.5 to 143.5, and with UConn, I did set them as a favorite here of 13 points. I'm going to be willing to lay the number as Marquette just has not gotten anything going all season long. Marquette has been a top 40 team in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis at home. Overall, though, they're about 130th in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. It's a UConn group that has been great in terms of their defense. They're 12th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They allow teams to shoot 28.7% from three-point range in their games played away from home. That is a top 10 mark in the country. I fully recognize that UConn has been a little bit iffy with regards to their overall offense, but it feels like it's really been able to pick up here in Big East play. They're shooting darn near 38% from three overall for the season. They shoot 39.2% from three-point range away from home. That is a top 15 mark in the country. Meanwhile, you've got a Marquette team that has been really relying upon Nigel James for their outside shooting. He throws in their 16 points, shoots 37% from three-point range, and then Chase Ross has been that do-it-all guy, 14 points, 4 boards, 3.5 assists, 2.5 steals per contest. Adrian Stevens does shoot 39.5% from three, 8 points per game, but you just don't have a lot of rebounding, and Alex Caravan, I think, is really going to be able to run things down low. With Caravan, he's been able to supply 13 points, 5 boards, and from three-point range, he's shooting right around about 41%. So low ball, 14 points. He really doesn't give you a ton from the outside, but Silas Centerbury, 11 points, 6.5 assists, 4.5 rebounds. Just great versatility there. It's also a UConn team as a top 20 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. They're a top 45 team with their own 2-point shooting percentage. Think that they should be able to find a way to persevere against a Marquette team that just has been rough all season long. So my line at 13, I'm going to be willing to lay with UConn and did set a total here of a 145. I think that Marquette, with being a top 75 team in terms of total possessions frame, gives it up on defense. So in on the over, and I'm going to be willing to lay the number here with UConn. 621, 622. LaSalle is going to be on there against St. Joe's. St. Joe's hopes to not be average Joe's as they are 9.5 point favorites. So on scheme, 139.5 to 141.5. And with LaSalle, I set them as an underdog of 11 points. So I'm going to be willing to lay it. St. Joe's has been very good with regards to their low post play, and just overall the defense has been good. 55th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. LaSalle continues to be outside the top 315 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Not even doing a superb job on defense. They're about 239th in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. One thing LaSalle's done an okay job of is grabbing second and third chances. They're a top 110 team in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, but you have a St. Joe's team that is a top 30 team with regards to shot block percentage, as Justice Ajabor has been really good with that regard, as right now he's throwing in their 5 points, 5 boards, but also a pair of blocks per game. With St. Joe's, they're not allowing a lot of second and third chances either, as they're a top 200 team with regards to their defensive rebound percentage. St. Joe's just has not been able to shoot threes to save their lives. They're outside the top 300 with their 3-point shooting percentage, losing Juice Jones early on this season did not help them out, but Jaden Glover has been able to give you 15 points, shoots in the mid-30s from three-point range. And then on the other end, for LaSalle, do have a trio of double figures, Jerome Brewer, Jaden Marshall, along with Rob Dockery, but Brewer's right now deal with injury. Marshall gives you about 12 points, throws in there about 33% three-point shooting, and hickory dickory dock around the clock out of Mr. Dockery. You get 11.5 points, 6 rebounds per game, but right now he's like the lone healthy guy that gives you over 5.5 rebounds per game. You don't get anything from the outside out of him, and for LaSalle, for as bad as they are with their three-point shooting, they're a bottom 15 team in the country. They're also a bottom 30 team with their 2-point shooting percentage as well. So I do think that you're going to have a lot of inefficiency in this game. LaSalle is certainly not looking to push tempo in terms of total possessions per game. This unit is 296th in the country, so I like the under. So my total 137, and I made St. Joe's the 11-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay this number. 623, 624. South Carolina is going to be on the road against Ole Miss, and Ole Miss does find themselves as a pretty good-sized favorite here of 6.5 to 7 points. Throughout this game, it is 146.5, and So I'm on line at 5. I'm going to be willing to take the points with South Carolina. It's an Ole Miss team that has done one thing well, take care of the ball, top 35 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, but you do have a Mississippi team that has just not been able to find it on offense. They're shooting 35.5% from three-point range at home. That's better than South Carolina, shooting 28.3% away from home, but South Carolina has been able to do a nice job in terms of guarding the perimeter. They're allowing teams to shoot from three-point range only about 31.9%. That's a top 75 mark in the country. South Carolina, they themselves have been a top 70 team in terms of taking care of the ball. Now, South Carolina's not grabbing second and third chances. 300th with regards to offensive rebound percentage. Not like this Mississippi team is doing a whole heck of a lot better, though, in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound. 238th, as really neither of these teams have much down low. Malik Dia has been able to give this Ole Miss team 14 plus points, right around about 6 rebounds per game. For South Carolina, you've only got one guy that keeps you over 5 rebounds per game. Mongolian Mike at about 10.5 points, 5.5 rebounds per game. And then Michi Johnson has been able to supply 17 points. He shoots 33% from 3. The one thing that South Carolina does have going for them on offense, they get to the free throw line, they hit those free throws. They shoot 78.6% of the charity stripe. That is a top 15 mark in the country. They are very much getting tattooed down low. They're outside the top 250 with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, but with this Ole Miss team, you just don't have a lot of faith that they're going to be able to execute on the inside as well. You've been able to get relatively good production out of A.J. Storr from the outside, as right now he's giving you 15 points, shoots 36% from 3, but Ole Miss is outside the top 235 with their own 2-point shooting percentage as well. Ole Miss has also been giving up a lot of second and third chances outside the top 250 in terms of defensive rebound percentage. They do shoot 75% of the free throw line, so interesting spot here. Got a pair of teams that aren't really looking to push a lot of tempo with Ole Miss. They're about 152nd in the country in terms of total possessions per game. South Carolina, 190th. I like the undersub by total 143, and taking the points from South Carolina, made them a 5-point dog. 6.5, 6.6. SMU is going to be on the road against Florida State, and Florida State is a 1.5 point favorite. 160.5 to 161.5 is the total, and with Florida State, I made them an underdog of 4 points, so I'm going to be willing to take SMU here on the money line. It's a Florida State team that they love to shoot from three-point range. Over 50% of their shots come from 3. That is a top 15 percentage in all of college basketball. And they're also outside the top 275 in terms of being able to shoot it from three-point range. In games played at home, they shoot less than 31% from three-point range. It's absolutely awful there. For Florida State, they've also been outside the top 210 with regards to points allowed on a per-possession basis, and opponents are shooting 34.5% from 3 against them. That's outside the top 215 in the country. You do have Robert McCray, who's been able to give you 15.5 points, 6 assists per contest. Chauncey Wiggins has been like the lone guy on the roster, shooting above 34% from 3s, up to 12.5 points, 4 boards per contest, but also Florida State team has been outside the top 200 with regards to rebound percentage. And for SMU, they are a top 100 team with regards to their overall rebound percentage, as you've got Kevin Miller. I refuse to call him Boopy, but he's been able to do a nice job in terms of booping teams with the fact that he supplies 19 points, 6.5 assists from 3-point, shoots 40% from 3. BJ turned it up afterwards, 12.5 points, 5 boards, and he shoots about 37% from 3. Samat Yedoglu should be the best low post player in this game, block and a half, 8 rebounds, 11 points per game. With SMU, they should be able to do an okay job here against a Florida State team that has done a great job in terms of generating turnovers. Florida State, top 45 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. SMU, top 150 team in terms of taking care of the ball, and if SMU needs free throws to get the job done, they do shoot 74.9% of the free throw line. That's right around about 100th in the country. Florida State, more on 72.5%. That's right around about 200. So I said SMU is a 4-point favorite, taking them on the money line. I like the over. Sub by total 166, 627, 628. Richmond is on the road against Duquesne, and Duquesne does find themselves as a 4.5 to a 5.5 point favorite. Total on this game, it is 149.5, and with Duquesne, I set them as a 3.5 point favorite. So I'm going to be willing to take the points with Richmond. Richmond has been one of the best road 3-point shooting teams in all of college basketball. Now, Richmond leaving something to be desired on the glass. They're outside the top 175 in terms of defensive rebound percentage. They are allowing teams to be able to grab about 30% of their misses as an offensive rebound. You've got a Duquesne team that has been right there with them at 202nd, so that's not going to be a kryptonite that gets unearthed for this Richmond team. You just have so many guys that have been able to come through for you, as they're right now shooting 39.5% from 3-point range away from home. That is a top 10 mark in the country. AJ Lopez has been the top guy, give you 12.5 points per game, but then from there, you just have a bevy of different guys that have been able to give you between 5.7 and 10.8 points per game. As a matter of fact, you've got 7 different guys in this category, including Will Johnson, who's been able to give you a pair of assists, right around about 9.5 points per game. Richmond also shoots 75.5% at the free throw line. That's a top 75 mark in the country. They've been very fragile on the inside. Richmond outside the top 240 with their own 2-point shooting percentage, outside the top 250 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, and they don't grab for themselves any sort of second and third chances. That's where John Hughley in his return becomes big for Duquesne, but ever since he's returned, he just has not been able to give you too much. You now have only 2 guys on this Richmond team that are giving you over 8.5 points per game. Terrence Gunyard, 17 points, shooting shoots 37.5% from 3. Jimmy Williams shoots 35% from 3 with about 15 points per contest. Jacob Niesis has may have thrown there 5 rebounds per game, and it's a Duquesne team that overall shoots about 34.5% from 3. Top 100 team with their own 2-point shooting percentage, but also been a team that's been very sloppy with the ball. They're outside the top 275 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis. On offense, on defense, they've been a top 100 team in terms of generating turnovers, but it's a Richmond team that has been able to do a pretty nice job in terms of valuing the ball with Richmond. They are a top 40 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. Think that keeps them lively here. So my line to 3.5. We'll take the points with Richmond. Set a total of a 151.5. Think that the late fouls get you over, so do like the over. 629, 630. You've got Rhode Island on the road against Fordham. Fordham is a 1.5 point favorite. 133.5 to 134.5 is the total. And with Rhode Island, I did set them as a underdog here of 2 points. I'm willing to lay 1.5 and not half a point more here with Fordham. You've got a pair of teams that are very much not looking to push tempo. Rhode Island, 284th in the country in terms of total possession space. Fordham is right around about 348th. And for Rhode Island, they just aren't getting a lot going from 3-point range. They shoot 30.5%. That is 332nd in the country. They have been giving it up from 3-point range, but you've also got a Fordham team that's well outside the top 10 with their 3-point shooting percentage. To the credit of Rhode Island, top 15 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. And Fordham has had a few issues here. They're outside the top 175 in terms of ball security, but for Fordham, they should be able to absolutely test weight on the glass. They've been a top 40 team with regards to rebound percentage. You've got DeJure Reeves, who's been supplying 17 points per contest, 3.7 assists. Christian Henry throws in their 5 assists, 11 points per contest. And then down low, you've been able to Rhea Schulte be able to give you 9 boards and 11 points per game. That's something that Rhode Island just not going to be able to match up with, though you do have good versatility out of Tyler Cochran for Rhode Island. 15 points, 6 boards, pair of assists. He only shoots about 31% from 3. Jamari Tripp was out for about 5 games. He's back. He shoots 41% from 3-point, so that helps out the cause quite a bit. And for Rhode Island, they've been a top 150 team with their own 2-point shooting percentage, hovering right around about 100th with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage with all the turnovers in this game, because Rhode Island is also hovering right around about 300th in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis on offense. I do think that you get a low-scoring slog, and I think that in the end, Fordham gets the job done. Set Fordham as a 2-point favorite. Willing to lay 1.5 with them. I like the under. Made my total 130, 631, 632. Western Kentucky is going to be on the road against Florida National. Florida National does find themselves as a underdog here of 1 to 1.5 points. It's on this game 160.5. So Western Kentucky has a 3.5 point favorite, so I'm going to be willing to lay the 1.5. For Florida National, it's just hard to be able to trust in them in a tight spot, even though it is a team that has been very good in terms of generating turnovers. They're a top 55 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis on defense, and the former Meat Roadrunner Corey Stevenson, he's been giving you about 18 points, shoots 40% from 3-point. Zwade Jackson, 12 points, 3 assists, he shoots 37.5% from 3-point, and Larry Okiana has been able to do a nice job down low with about 6.5 boards, 10 points per game. As for Florida National, they're a top 100 team in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, but boy oh boy are they giving up second and third chances. They're outside the top 300 in terms of defensive rebound percentage. Have a Western Kentucky team that's been able to do a solid job on the defensive side of things. In games played away from home in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, they do ascend into the top 80 in the country. It should be an up and down game. Florida National top 25 team in terms of total possessions per game. Western Kentucky is right around about 49th, and the main kryptonite for Western Kentucky has been their interior offense. They are outside the top 330 with regards to 2-point shooting percentage. For Florida National, they're right around about 300th in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. Top 150 team in terms of 2-point shooting percentage, so that actually works out for Western Kentucky. It's been a top 30 team in terms of getting to the free throw line. They shoot 76.3% at the charity stripe, with Teagan Moore give you more, 19 points. He shoots 41% from 3. Ryan Myers is a 40% 3-point shooter. Grant Newell's been able to throw in there about 12.5 points per game. I think that Western Kentucky, with being a top 55 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, gets the job done and does just enough for the over. So my total 161.5. I like the over, and I'm willing to lay the small number here with Western Kentucky. 633, 634. TCU is going to be playing against Cincinnati, and yes, we're on to Cincinnati, who's on to being a 1.5 to a 2.5 point underdog. 138.5 to 140.5 is the total. Set a total of 141.5. I do like the over. It is a Cincinnati team that's been able to find some offense. They're still outside the top 200 overall for the season in terms of points scored on a per possession basis and in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, but they have found their groove as a mid-tempo team. 159th in terms of total possessions per game. It is a TCU team that looks to push tempo. 88th in terms of total possessions per game. The forte of TCU being a top 40 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, as it's a TCU bunch at their country average shooting 33.1% from 3-point themselves, and they will give up some open looks from 3-point range, especially at home. Right now for TCU, they are allowing teams to shoot from 3-point range right in that neighborhood about 34%. That goes up to 34.4% at home. And for Cincinnati, this has been a team that's been very good on defense, top 25 unit in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but that does go outside the top 70 in games played away from home, and David Punch is able to give you some good punch down low for TCU. He's been supplying multiple blocks, 6.5 boards, 13 points per game. Xavier Edmonds, he throws in there 40% three-point shooting, 13 points per game. Micah Robinson, 10.5 points per contest. Jaden Pierre, 10 points. He shoots 36% from three-point range, but I do think that for Cincinnati, they're going to be able to do a good job of holding in there. Now, did set my line at 3.5, so I'm still going to be willing to lay it. And here's a big reason why. With Cincinnati, you just can't trust them at a tight spot. Right now, they are shooting just 68.1% of the free throw line outside the top 310 in all of college basketball. Even with Bob Miller giving you 14 points, 10 rebounds, they're going to have some difficulty there. But with Safa team is giving you a block and a half, 7 boards per game. And then Jizzle James shoots 44% from 3, about 11.5 points per game. You also have 11.5 points out of Day Thomas. He shoots 39.5% from 3. But I do take a look at this spot, and I think that TCU going to be able to generate just enough turnovers and play good enough defense to get the job done, and those late fouls get you over. So set my line at 3.5, willing to lay with TCU, and I'm going to be in on the over side. I told 141.5, 635, 636. This is Cornell, and they're going to be on the road. They're facing off against Dartmouth. Dartmouth is a home underdog of 4.5 to 5.5 points. 165.5 is the total, and with Dartmouth, I set them as 1.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take a shot on them on the money line. It's a Cornell team that has been absolutely magnificent in terms of their three-point shooting. This is a Cornell team that, in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, overall, they are 38th in all of college basketball. If you look at just games played away from home, that goes to Mambo number 5 in all of college basketball. They're also outside the top 340 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. In games played away from home, they allow teams to shoot 39.5% from 3. That's a bottom 15 mark in the country. And for Dartmouth, they've actually been able to do a pretty solid job in terms of guarding the three-point line. Teams shoot 33.6% for 3 against them. That's the top 165 mark in the country. Dartmouth is not taking care of the ball. They're outside the top 3 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis on offense, but Cornell's not really generating a lot of turnovers right now. Dartmouth not going to give themselves any sort of second and third chances, but they too shoot 36% from three-point range. With Dartmouth, you've got Kareem Thomas, give you 16.5 points. He shoots 45% from 3. Brandon Mitchell-Day has been able to throw in their 12 points, 9 boards per contest. Connor Edmondson has been able to do a nice job as mixer and shaker with about 10 points per contest. And then for Cornell, you've been able to get a lot out of really your big 3 at Sang Hinton. He's hitting it hard. He's been able to give you 12.5 points from three-point range. He's bombing it at 42%. Cooper Nora, Jake Feigen, both shoot 39% from 3. Between the two of them, you've been able to get about 36 points per contest. And for both of these guys, they come out to shoot over 80% at the free throw line. But again, with Cornell, just an absolute wreck on defense. They have been outside the top 120 with regards to their overall rebound percentage. They themselves are about 20th with regards to turnovers on a per possession basis. Do think that in a very high-scoring expose, as Cornell is playing very quickly in terms of total possessions per game, this team is 39th in the country, that Dartmouth gets the job done. Semi line at 1.5, like Dartmouth on the money line, and the over 637, 638, Arizona State on the road against Iowa State. Iowa State, a very sizable favorite here, as you're going to be laying with them 15.5 points. So on this game, 148.5 to 149.5. Made my line 16.5. Don't want to go past the 16, but I'm going to be willing to lay. Arizona State playing at a pretty aggressive pace, 82nd in the country in terms of total possessions per game. For Iowa State, neither here nor there, 226th, and Iowa State continues to be a top 12 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Interestingly, with this Arizona State team, they've been a better offense when they've been away from home rather than at home. As a matter of fact, they're averaging 3 points more per 100 possessions in road/court games rather than at home. They've been a top 50 team in terms of points per possession when they've been away from home, and that 3-point shooting percentage for Arizona State, 31.9% at home, 36.5% away from home. But you've got an Iowa State team that's just been an absolute cooker all season long from 3, 38.4%, 11th in the country. That goes up to 40.4% in their home games. And for Iowa State, they have been the better rebounding team. I'm not going to call them amazing or anything like that, but hey, 29th in the country in terms of rebound percentage. Arizona State's 84th. You've got Santiago Triad, who's been able to give you about 5.5 rebounds per game, along with Masaba Diop, and Diop does give you multiple blocks per game. Mo Odom, like his game for this Arizona State team, 17.5 points, 6 assists, shoots 39% from 3-point range. But then on the flip side for Iowa State, Milan Mimosilovic has been the top 3-point shooter really in this entire conference, 17 points on 50% 3-point shooting. Joshua Jefferson, 7.5 boards, 5 assists, 16.5 points per game. Tamon Lipsby, he generates 2+ steals per game, 13 points per game. Not really going to pop it well from 3, but Iowa State continues to be a top 10 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. Arizona State just a hair outside the top 135 in terms of their ball security, and Arizona State very willing to put you on the free throw line. That actually hurts Iowa State a little bit since they only shoot 67.5% at the free throw line, but I do think that the overall offensive execution going to be there for Iowa State to get the job done. Did semi total at a 150.5. I like the over, and I'm willing to lay up to 16 with Iowa State. State, 639, 640. Sam Houston State is on the road against Liberty, and old Liberty is a 4.5 point favorite. 155.5 to 156.5 is the total. Made a total of 151.5, so I'm going to be in on the under, and I do like the points here with Sam Houston State. Both of these teams have shot it really well from three-point range. Liberty, top 10 team in the country. They shoot over 39% from three, but Sam Houston State is a top 25 team in the country, and Sam Houston State is supplying for themselves many more second and third chances. For Liberty, in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound out of 365 Division I teams, they're 365th, 15.4% of misses become an offensive rebound. Meanwhile, with the Sam Houston team, they are 74th in the country. It's a Sam Houston team that's been able to do a much better job in terms of guarding the arc. Right now, for Liberty, they are allowing teams to shoot darn near 37.7% from three-point. That's 350th in all of college basketball. Sam Houston, not the most amazing team in the world, but still 32.1%. That's a top 75 mark in the country. For Liberty, you do have Brett Decker, who's been able to give you 16 points per game. He shoots just a hair below 50% from three-point. I like the versatility of Zach Cleveland, 11.5 points, 7.5 boards, 7 assists per contest. And then Keita Metheny, he continues to shoot about 40% from three, 13.5 points per game. But Sam Houston State just has weapons upon weapons, as right now for this bunch, you've got essentially 7 different healthy players that give you at least 8.4 points per game, with Boy King, great name, leading the way, 14.5 points, shoots 38% from three. Jacob Walker, 37% three-point shooter. It's a Sam Houston State team that's better in terms of generating turnovers as well. They're a top 225 team with this respect as well. You've been able to have Keshai Knott give you a bit of everything, 7.5 boards, 7.5 points, Barrett Seals per contest, all while shooting 40% from three-point. And if Liberty needs to cover this game at the free throw line, they're not necessarily the strongest there at about 70.3%. That's outside the top 240 in all of college basketball. So set a total of 151.5. I like the under, and I'm willing to take the points with Sam Houston. Made them a 1.5 point dog, 641, 642. Kansas State on the road against Kansas, and Kansas does find themselves as a 16.5 point favorite total on this game, 152.5 to 154.5. Made my line 17.5, so I'm going to be willing to lay it here with the Jayhawks. Know that things have been rough ever since Darren Peterson, ironically enough, has been playing more minutes, but it's a Kansas State team that's just getting wrecked in all facets of basketball right now. They obviously let go of Jerome Tang. They've been pushing a very wild tempo, 18th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and the interim coach in Matthew Driscoll, that was actually the former North Florida coach, where his teams did nothing but bomb from three and played very, very up-tempo. And now you've got PJ Haggerty, who was out of the fold for the team's last game as well, so that's a big, giant issue. Who knows if he's going to be playing at all for the rest of the season. He was averaging 23 points per game, and now it's up to everyone else to be able to step up. You've got Nate Johnson, give you about 12 points, 2.5 steals, does shoot 40% from three, and you've got David Castillo, who's able to supply about 10.5 points per game, but those are the lone two healthy guys, if Haggerty does not play in this game, that are giving you over 10 points per contest. They have absolutely no rebounding whatsoever, and for Kansas, while they're not going to put you under duress, it's a Jayhawks team as well outside the top 3 in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. They're not allowing open looks as well. Top 25 team in terms of opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. They do shoot 77% as a collective at the free throw line. Peterson, when he's firing all cylinders, is great. 19.5 points, shoots 38.5% from three. Just hasn't been efficient on offense over the last few games, but now you've got a Kansas State team that's well outside the top 175 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Flory Badunga is going to be able to dominate down low. 14 points, 2.5 blocks, 9 rebounds per game. Bryson Tiller, he's able to give you 6 boards, a little bit over a block and a half per contest. Trey White is a 42% three-point shooter. Kansas obviously needs to figure some things out with regards to rotations and how to utilize Peterson, but I think that this is a perfect testing ground to be able to do so. Kansas has been a relatively mid-tempo team in terms of total possessions per game. Right now, they're checking in more than neighbored about 200th in the country. I think that they slow things down, hold up on defense to be able to get the job done. Semi-total at a 147.5. So I'm going to be willing to lay with Kansas, and like the under, I did semi-total at a 147.5, 643, 644. You got Vanderbilt, and they are going to be on the road against Tennessee, and Tennessee is a 3.5 to a 4.5 point favorite. 147.5 to 148.5 is the total, and with Tennessee, made them a 4-point favorite. So we're right in between my number, between a 3.5 to a 4.5. Personally, I would rather take 4.5 rather than lay 3.5, mainly because with Vanderbilt, this is a unit that has been pretty solid on the defensive side of things. They're a top 50 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and Tennessee has just been very sloppy with the ball. Tennessee is outside the top 235 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis. On offense, you've got a Vanderbilt team that's obviously looking to push tempo, 11th in the country in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, all while being a team that in terms of total possessions per game is 37th. Tennessee, much more of a mid-tempo team in terms of total possessions per game, 211th in the country, but going back to that point of turnovers right now for Tennessee, they are right around about 234th in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis. Now, Tennessee is going to have the edge down low. Depending upon the day, they're either number 1 or number 2 in terms of percentage of their missed shots. They result in an offensive rebound. Felix Opara has been rock solid with about 5.5 to 6 boards, gives you a block per contest. Now, they have been dealing with an injury to Nate Amond. There's a chance that he goes in this game, but it seems pretty doubtful at this point. He's been supplying the team with about 17.5 points per game, and that's a big reason why I do also lean towards the points as well, because his status is up in the air, and even if he does play, he's probably not going to be 100%. Still rock solid on the glass, so with Jalen Carey give you 7.5 points, 6.5 rebounds per game, and then you do throw in there what you've been able to get out of Bishop Boswell. It's been able to step up in a nice way, about 3 assists, 7 points per game. But on the flip side for Vanderbilt, even though the Frankie Collins situation wasn't great, at the very least you've got some clarity with that. He's not going to be back for the rest of the season, but you've got the Tylers. Tyler Nickel, Tyler Tanner, with Tanner, 19 points, 2.5 steals, 5 assists, shoots 37% from 3. Nickel shoots 40% from 3. Tevin McLaughlin has been able to give you 7 rebounds per game for a Vanderbilt team that does give up a few more second and third chances than what you'd like to see, and they do give up a lot of opportunities at the free throw line, but they've been a top 65 team in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, top 75 team in terms of 2-point shooting percentage. At Tennessee, them going to the free throw line is not the world's greatest thing. They shoot 69.5% at the free throw line. They really rely upon Jacoby Gillespie for everything with his 18 points, 5.5 assists per game, and that ailment to aim it, I do think is going to be looming very large in this game, so I'm in on 4.5 plus here with Vanderbilt, and I did set my total at a 148. Right now we're between 147.5 to a 148.5. Again, with that amen injury, I lean more to the under of 148.5 rather than to the over of 147.5. 645, 646 Louisville is on the road against Miami. Miami does find themselves as a 1.5 point favorite in some spots. Other spots to pick them. 12 game 156.5 to 157.5, and with Miami to make them the 1.5 point favorite. So I'm going to be willing to take them on this pick 'em line, slash as a very, very slim favorite. You got a Louisville team that just has been so inconsistent with their 3-point shooting away from home. We'll say this is a Miami team that's been outside the top 250 with regards to opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, but with this Louisville group, they take over 53% of their field goals from 3-point range. They shoot 37.6% from 3-point range at home. That goes down to about 33.5% away from home, and Mikael Brown has been such an integral part of this team. He missed the last game for them, and if he does play in this game, he's most likely not going to be 100%, so that's a big, giant issue for a Louisville team that does need to rely upon now Mr. Ryan Conwell, who's been able to do a nice job supplying the team with about 16 points per game. He shoots in the mid to high 30s from 3-point. Kashawn Pryor saw the full for Louisville as well, but he's been out for much of the season, so there's no surprise there. It is a Louisville team that has been shockingly pretty solid on both the glass and the defensive side of things, inside the top 40 in terms of both rebound percentage and points allowed on a per possession basis, but it's a Miami team that's been very dominant down low as well. They're a top 30 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage. Malik Renew, 19.6 half board, shoots 36.5% for 3. Drew Washington has become a 36% 3-point shooter for a Miami team that is either here nor there with their 3-point shooting. They're right around about 34.5 to 35% 3-point shooting, so they're good. They're not necessarily great, but that said, with this Miami team, it does feel like they're finding their rhythm a little bit more here, and additionally, being able to get themselves second and third chances with Ernest Uday. Only give you right around about 8.5 to 9 points per game, but being able to throw in there about 9 rebounds per game, with this being a Miami team that as well has been pretty solid in terms of generating turnovers. This is a team that is in the top 85 in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, top 40 team with their 2-point shooting percentage. I do think that at home, they find a way to get the job done, and do think that you're going to give very much an up and down game. Miami playing at a brisk pace of 127th in terms of total possessions per game. Louisville, they are very much looking to push tempo at 68. So my total 161.5. I like the over, and Miami here on this pick 'em line. 647, 648. George Washington, our nation's first president, is going to be on the road against Loyola Chicago. Loyola Chicago, 9.5 to 10.5 point home underdogs. Throughout this game, it is anywhere between 152 to 152.5. Now, I'm seeing 9s out there. The 10s have completely evaporated. It's now between 9 to 9.5, and I'm willing to lay up to 9 with George Washington. I did set my number at a 9.5, and with George Washington, it's a unit that has been able to do a really good job with their offensive efficiency when they've been away from home. In games in a road/neutral venue, they do find themselves in the top 35 in terms of points per possession, and they shoot 37% from 3-point away from home. It's a Loyola team that's been outside the top 300 with regards to opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. Their own 3-point shooting percentage is 306 as they shoot 30.2% at home. They're a bottom 25 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, and that's big for a George Washington team that's really been their biggest issue on offense. They hover outside the top 25 with regards to turnovers on a per possession basis on offense. You've got Rafael Castro back, though. He was missing for 6 games. He's giving you about 16.9 rebounds per game, and you do have Miles Rubin on the flip side for Loyola Chicago, 12 plus points, 7 plus boards, about 2.5 blocks per game, but Castro throws in there a block and a half per contest as well. Trey Autry has been one of your main 3-point shooters at about 39.5%. Trey Dinkins, he shoots 40% from the outside, gives you about 9.5 points per game. With his George Washington group, they've been able to do a nice job with regards to executing on the inside as well. They're a top 45 team with regards to their 2-point shooting percentage. That's one thing Loyola Chicago's been able to do an okay job of. In terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, they're a top 125 team there, but Again, getting tattooed from 3-point both on offense and on defense. They don't even do the little things well. Loyal Chicago outside the top 3 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis on offense. They shoot 66.9% the free throw line. This has just been an unmitigated disaster. You've got Justin Moore who's currently out of the fold for the team. DeWolf Tavares gives you about 9 points per game, but he's not shooting it well from 3. And then Xavier Amos has given the team a shot in the arm in terms of scoring. Missed the first 14 or so games this season, 11.5 points per game, but he only shoots about 31.5% from 3-point. With George Washington being able to get Castro back, I think that allows them to win from within, get the job done, and with Loyal Chicago being outside the top 3 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, George Washington, top 125 team, in terms of total possessions per game, he gets just enough for the over. So my total 153.5, like the over, and I'm willing to lay up to 9 with our nation's first president, 649, 650. You've got Princeton on the road against Yale. Yale is a 13.5 point favorite, 137.5 to 138.5 is the total. Did set my total here at a 142.5. I do like the over. Now, both of these teams are playing at a very slow and controlled pace, with Yale 316th in the country in terms of total possessions. Princeton is 347th, but you've got a pair of teams that are very content to take a lot of threes. Princeton is a team that ranks in the top 40 in terms of percentage of their field goal attempts that come from 3-point now. They shoot about 32.4% from 3 away from home compared to 38% at home. And Yale, they just shoot anywhere, anytime. This team is 3rd in the country, shooting 40.5% from 3-point. It goes up to 43% at home. And with Yale, I do think that they get the job done. I could only set my line at 12.5, though. You do have a Princeton team that's been respectable in terms of being able to guard the 3-point line. They're absolutely getting tattooed on the inside, but it's a Princeton team that is allowing teams to only shoot about 31.2% from 3. That is a top 50 mark in the country, and Yale's been lackadaisical with their defense. At home, teams are shooting about 36.5% from 3-point range against them. That is well outside the top 275 in all of college basketball. If you look at just overall points allowed on a per possession basis, it's a Yale team that is 185th in all of college basketball overall, but if you look at specifically the home games, that does fall well outside the top 255, even though you've got Nick Townsend, who's been able to shoot darn near 50% from 3-point. He throws in there 15-plus points per contest. Isaac Salazar has been able to do a nice job throwing in there 12.6 rebounds per game. You've got a lot of nice mixers and shakers for the team. You do have a Princeton bunch that, getting back Dalen Davis was a shot in the arm for that offense. He and Jackson Hickey have been able to combine for 30.5 points per game between the two of them. They're shooting 40% from 3-point, and then Malik Abdullah has been able to give you 9.5 points, 5.5 rebounds per game. You've got a guy in Sebastian Whitfield who's been able to step up in a big way to be able to give this team a few boards, a little bit of something off the bench as well. So I do think the Princeton is going to be able to do just enough to be able to hold in there against a Yale defense that has been very, very leaky, to say the least. Not a lot of second and third chances to be had here in this game either, as Princeton, they're outside the top 275 in terms of their offensive rebound percentage. You're not giving themselves second and third chances, but they're not allowing opponents second and third chances as well. In terms of defensive rebound percentage, they are currently checking in games played away from home in the top 55 in the country. Yale, more around about 119. So I did set my total 142.5. I do like the over, and I'm willing to take 13 plus here with Princeton. 651, 652. Stanford is on the road against NC State. NC State is a 7.5 to an 8.5 point favorite. And your total on this game is 152.5, and I made a total of 155.5. I do like the over. I have the Stanford team as a relatively mid-tempo, 222nd in the country in terms of total possessions per game. NC State, they've been looking to push a little bit more tempo, 114th in terms of total possessions per game. NC State very much valuing the ball, 8th in the country in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. The forte of the Stanford defense has been being a top 100 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, and NC State is able to uncork it from 3. They shoot 38.1% from the outside. That's a top 20 mark in the country. Meanwhile, Stanford away from home has been a really good 3-point shooting team. They shoot 36.1% from the outside in games played away from home. That is a top 55 mark in the country. I did set this line at a 7.5, so right now I'm seeing out there a few 8.5s. I'm going to be willing to take the points. I know that Stanford has been dealing with some travel, but I know that they have played already at least one game out there on the East Coast, so that's a little bit less daunting. And Abuka Okore has been absolutely incredible for this team, as right now he's supplying 23 points, 3.5 boards, 3.5 assists, shoots 35% from 3, and then Benny Geeler is able to Geeler it on. He shoots 42% from 3-point. Stanford also giving themselves some second and third chances in games played away from home. You look at their offensive rebound percentage. Overall, it's 131st, but in road/short games, that does ascend into the top 75 in all of college basketball. It's an NC State team that hasn't really fought for those second and third chances, 225th with regards to offensive rebound percentage. So AJ Rose, who's been able to give you 7.5 points, 5.5 rebounds per game, should be able to have a little bit of success here. Now, it is a Stanford team that they have not necessarily been the world's greatest team in terms of regarding the three-point line, but neither is this NC State team, so both of these teams should be getting good looks from three-point range, with NC State 229th in the country in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, 29.9% at home, 40.1% away from home. I think that split irons out just a little bit, and Samford, they're allowing teams to shoot 34.2% from the outside. That's about 192nd. You got Kadir Copeland, who's been really that do-it-all guy for NC State. He's thrown in there over 5.5 assists. He's been able to give you 13.5 points from three-point. He's shooting about 40% from three. Darion Williams, he's at 39.5% from the outside, 14.5 points per contest. Paul Air McNair has been able to shoot 41% from three with 13.5 points per game. So do you think that you get plenty of scoring here? I like the over, so I total 155.5, and I'm going to be willing to take a plus here with Stanford, 653, 654. Middle Tennessee is going to be on the road. They face off against Missouri State. Missouri State is a 1.5-point favorite. Total on this game, 144.5, and with Missouri State, I did set them as a 2.5-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. Just really hard to trust in Middle Tennessee in a nip and tuck spot because they just don't really do the little things well. It's a Middle Tennessee team that, with regards to their defensive rebound percentage, they're about 146th in the country. They're just outside the top 175 in terms of both points scored and points allowed on a per possession basis. They're a country average team in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage, so there's not a lot that they truly do awful. There's really nothing that they do great, but again, they do shoot 67.7% at the free throw line in games played away from home. That is outside the top 275 in all of college basketball. Do have a Missouri State team that right now they only shoot 67.8% at the free throw line. That is 327th of the country, so they leave a lot to be desired on that front as well. But for Missouri State, I do think that they're going to be able to have a little bit of success here with Keith Palick and what he's able to bring to the table with about 18 points, 6 half boards. Only shoots about 27% from three, but the Williams have been able to shoot from three. Kobe Williams and Trey Williams. Trey shoots 37% from three with 9 points per contest. Kobe, 15 points. He shoots 37.5% from the outside. For Missouri State, they're hovering right around about 190th to 210th in terms of both opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. Missouri State has been a relatively okay team in terms of offensive rebound percentage. Or a top 185 team there. You've had Michael Osi-Benusu be able to chip in there about 7 rebounds per game. And then for Middle Tennessee, you've had Kamari Lands really be the head of the stake for the team right now, supplying you with about 13.5 points. Pair of assists, shoots 33% from three. Torrey Olson has been great down low. A little bit over a block per contest. Middle Tennessee, top 55 team of the country in terms of block shot percentage, but also for Middle Tennessee, they have been a team that just has not been able to be the most efficient on offense. They're outside the top 180 in terms of ball security. They're outside the top 200 in terms of generating turnovers. I think that Missouri State finds just enough to be able to get the job done here in what I think is going to be a relatively mid-tempo game. 207th is what Missouri State is in terms of total possessions, bringing Middle Tennessee 215th. So semi-total at a 140.5. I like the under, and I'm willing to lay the 1.5 here with Missouri State. 655, 656. Georgia is going to be on the road against Mississippi State. Mississippi State is a 5.5-point home underdog. So on this game, 163.5, and with Mississippi State, I did set them as a underdog here of 3.5 points. So I'm going to be willing to take the points. It is a Georgia team that's just given up way too many second and third chances. Now, for Georgia, this has been a unit that has been able to do a solid job in terms of giving themselves second and third chances, and they're actually number one in the country in terms of block shots on a per game basis. Amatu Surreal has been able to give you 2.7 blocks per contest, and then you've got Jeremiah Wilkerson in the backcourt shooting in the mid-30s from 3-point, 17 points per game. Marcus Millender is a double-figure scorer. He's up to shooting 40% from 3-point, but Georgia still has been a little bit lackadaisical with that 3-point shooting. Overall for the season, they're still hovering right around about 200th in the country. They only shoot 31.2% from 3-point in a road/core venue, and for Mississippi State, it has been pretty much all bad for them. They don't generate any turnovers whatsoever. They're a bottom 15 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. They shoot just 31% from 3-point at home, and both of these teams are looking to push quite a bit of tempo. For Mississippi State, they are 41st in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Georgia, they are even faster than that. They are currently at 9th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. But again, I do think that those second and third chances, with Georgia being a team that currently is 329th in terms of defensive rebound percentage, about 32.6% of opponents' missed shots become an offensive rebound, that's going to be able to keep Mississippi State lively. And Mississippi State does have the top overall scorer in this game, as Joshua Hubbard has been able to give them 21.5 points, 3.5 assists per game, shoots about 34% from three. Do have a nice 3-point shooter in Jabari McGee, shooting 39% from 3-point. You've had Jaden Epps throwing there about 13.5 points. Quincy Ballard, Akura, these two guys give you about 12 rebounds per game. So I did think that with Mississippi State, even though they shoot 66.4% the free throw line, absolutely ghastly there, they do just enough to be able to hold in this game, as they have been also a top 140 team with regards to opponents' 3-point shooting percentage as well. So I did set my line here at 3.5. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Mississippi State, making a total of a 163.5 right now. Seeing some 164s out there, that's my minimum buy point on the under to go along with the points here with Mississippi State. 657, 658, you've got Florida. They're going to be on the road against Kentucky, and Big Blue Nation does find themselves as a home underdog here of 7 to 7.5 points. So on this game, you're going to be getting that at a 158.5 to a 159.5. Now we're starting to see 5.5 to 6.5. Now I set my line at a 5.5. So at the 6.5, I'm still willing to take the points, but starting to see a little bit of love in the market here for Kentucky. And for Kentucky, I do think that they're going to be able to hold in there. Florida's still been a really rough team with regards to their backcourt play. Boogie Fland has been a little bit better here over the last few weeks, but still, overall for the season, Boogie Fland is shooting 22% from 3, 11.5 points per game. It really surprises me that they haven't utilized Irvin Klofstar in the starting lineup. He averages 10 points, shoots 40% from 3, not really much of a facilitator, but he's a nice one-trick pony sort of guy. And then you have Xavier Lee as your main facilitator, 4 assists, 12 points per game. No question, Florida going to be able to dominate down low. This team is in the top 2 in terms of offensive rebound percentage and total rebound percentage with Ruben Gigielu, 11.5 points, 11.5 rebounds per game. Thomas Haw, he's dealing with a little bit of injury, did not play in the last game, and if he does play in this game, he's probably going to be quite limited, but 17.6 rebounds out of him. Alex Condon has been able to give you about 15 points, 3.5 assists per game, so even if they don't have Haw, they're still going to be relatively fine there, but he is one of their top 3-point shooters, and for Kentucky, you've had Ortega Owe do a nice job here in conference play. He's overall your top scorer, being able to supply about 18 points, 4.5 boards. Denzel Aberdeen has been able to throw in their 13 points, 3.5 assists, and with Colin Chandler, 44% three-point shooter, 10 points per game. You've got Malachi Moreno along with Mohamed Diabate, who've been able to combine for just under 12 rebounds per game. So I do think that for this Kentucky team, even though they're going to not be able to win the battle down low, I don't think that they're going to get completely destroyed there. They've been a top 85 team with their own 2-point shooting percentage in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage as well. And with Florida just still having some difficulties with regards to their backcourt play, I do think that that allows Kentucky to do just enough on their home floor to be able to hold in there. It's a Kentucky team that's been relatively mid-tempo in terms of total possessions per game. Right now, they're hovering right around about 135th in terms of total possessions per game. Florida obviously is looking to pump up that tempo a little bit at currently in terms of total possessions per game, being a top 40 team in all of college basketball. As a matter of fact, 27. So I just set a total here of a 153.5. I'm going to be in on the under because Florida has been so good on the glass. I'm willing to take those points with Kentucky. 659, 660. You've got Florida Atlantic on the road against Wichita State, and Wichita State does find themselves at 6.5 to 7.5 point favorites. So on this game, 146.5 to 147.5, and with Wichita State, I made them a 3.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take the points. It is a Wichita State team that has been great on the offensive glass, a top 25 team in terms of percentage of their missed shots that resulted in an offensive rebound. Florida Atlantic, 59th in terms of defensive rebound percentage. You're not allowing a lot of second and third chances. Now, Devin Vanderpool, who's been their top scorer, he's right now dealing with injury. If he goes at all in this game, he's not going to be anywhere close to 100%, so I pretty much ruled him out. But that said, you've got Cannon Carlisle, who's right now supplying 14 points in the backcourt, throws in there 3 assists. It's not a Wichita State team that really generates a lot of turnovers, so Florida Atlantic being outside the top 210 in terms of ball security, that doesn't mean as much in this game. But Florida Atlantic has been neither here nor there, shooting 33% from 3-point, but they've also been a top 75 team in terms of their offensive rebound percentage. They've been strong down low, top 85 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. Josiah Parker stepped up in a big way with about 10 points, 6 boards, and then you've got Isaiah Elohim, who's been able to shoot about 37.5% from 3. Throwing there Devin Williams, who's been able to give you 2.7 blocks per game. He's been rock solid. Now you've got the Wilberg on the flip side for Wichita State. He stands over 7 feet tall, 8.5 points, 8.3 rebounds, block and half per contest. Keenan Giles shoots 38% from 3, 19.5 points per game, and Wichita State, they shoot about 34% from 3-point. Even though they're so good on the glass, though, they are outside the top 250 in terms of their 2-point shooting percentage. I do think that that's going to hold them back here a little bit, and if they get sent to the free throw line for Wichita State, 68.7% of the free throw line outside the top 290. So I'm going to be willing to take the points here with Florida Atlantic, made them a 3.5 point underdog, made this total a 145.5 as well. You have a Wichita State team that's relatively mid-tempo. Florida Atlantic looking to bump up that tempo, 64th in terms of total possessions per game, but again, a little bit banged up. So in on the under and the points here with Florida Atlantic. 661, 662. Jacksonville State is going to be on the road against UTEP, and Jacksonville State a underdog of 1.5 points. So on this game, it is 139.5, and I made Jacksonville State the 2.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take a shot on them on the money line. Jacksonville State, not quite the rebounding team on the offensive glass that they've been in the past. They're not allowing second and third chances, though. They are 43rd in the country, with opponents grabbing only about 24.9% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound. You look at games played away from home, they go into the top 30 in terms of defensive rebound percentage, and this has been a team that's been relatively solid with their 3-point shooting percentage, 83rd in the country at 35.6% now. They shoot 30.6% from 3 away from home, 39.8% at home, so big giant split there. And then you have a UTEP team then has been shooting 37.2% from 3 at home compared to about 31.8% away from home, but they're not generating the same amount of turnovers that they did a season ago. It's a Jacksonville St team that has been neither here nor there in terms of taking care of the ball. They're about 175th in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, and it's a UTEP team that's outside the top 3 with their 2-point shooting percentage. Neither of these teams are necessarily too trustworthy at the free throw line if you need them to be able to cover as well. Right now for this UTEP group, they shoot about 70.3%, and at the free throw line, Jacksonville St 68.6%, but with Jacksonville St, I would argue that you've got the top player in this game, as right now you're getting 19.7 boards per contest out of Mustafa El Montequil. AC Bryan, he shoots about 40% per 3 with 12 points per game. Alderic Eakins Ford has been able to give you about 8.5 points. Doesn't shoot it well at the free throw line, but does shoot about 35% from 3-point range for a Jacksonville St team that has been rough with their 2-point shooting percentage. They're outside the top 3 and their top 100 team with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, though. So they've been solid on the defensive side of things. It's a UTEP team that they themselves are outside the top 3 with their own 2-point shooting percentage, as Jamal West has been able to give you 14.6 half boards, but only shoots about 31% per 3. Elijah Jones and Kasim Watson, these two guys combined to shoot 39% per 3. Between the two of them, about 26 points per game. Caleb Blackwell's thrown in there about 10.5 points per game, but it's a very top-heavy team, and they're not going to get a lot of tempo. Jacksonville St, in terms of total possessions per game, 288th in all of college basketball. UTEP, they're playing at an even slower tempo right now. They're 312, so I do like the under, so I told 134.5, and with Jacksonville St, made them the 2.5-point favorite, so I'm taking them on the money line. 663, 664. New Mexico is going to be on the road facing off against Utah State. Utah State is a favorite here of 7.5 to 6.5 points on this game. It is 156.5 to 157.5. Also made my line 7.5, 7 or less. I'm going to be willing to lay it with Utah State. It's a Utah State team that has been very good in terms of generating turnovers. They are 18th in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. New Mexico has been rock solid as well. New Mexico, top 40 team with this regard, and New Mexico in games played away from them, top 30 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Opponents shoot just 28.4% from 3-point range as well. That is a top 10 mark in all of college basketball. New Mexico, neither here nor there with their tempo. 118th in terms of total possessions per game. Utah State is more around about 195th in terms of total possessions per game, and it is a Utah State team that has been pretty solid with their 3-point shooting percentage at 35.4%. Not amazing, but certainly getting the job done. Meanwhile, for New Mexico, they're 80th. They shoot about 35.8% from 3-point range, where Utah State has really been able to make their hay, has been down low, as they've been a top 35 team with regards to their overall 2-point shooting percentage. And for New Mexico, I think that they might have a little bit of issue there, even though you've had Jake Hall along with Tomislav Bujan doing a nice job. Bujan, 12 points, 10 rebounds per game, and then you've got Hall, who's been able to supply the team with about 16 points per game, and Hall is shooting 45% from 3-point range. You've got Dayton Albury chipping in there about 11.5 points, a little bit over a steal per contest, and you've got also Araya Tente, who's been able to shoot 37.5% from 3-point range. Meanwhile, MJ Collins has been the top scorer for Utah State. Right now, he pumps in there about 17 points per game. He's shooting about 37% from 3-point range. Mason Fosloff, 41% 3-point shooter, 16 points, 6 boards, 3 assists, 2 steals per contest. Carson Templin has been able to give you 9 points, 4 boards per contest as well, so he's been able to do a nice job down low. In the end, I do think that Utah State finds a way to get the job done, even though they do shoot just 70.2% at the free throw line. They've been able to do a solid job on the interior as well, being a top 60 team with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, while this is a New Mexico team that they themselves have been looking to pile drive the ball down low a little bit more, and they've been a top 100 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage. So, like the under, I tell at a 151.5, willing to lay up to 7 here with Utah State. 665, 666, you've got Boise State on the road against Colorado State. Colorado State does find themselves as a favorite here of 1.5 points on this game, 142.5 to 143.5. Made a total of a 142, so I like the under. We've got a Boise State team that is not looking to play super slow, but they're not aggressive with their tempo. 230th in terms of total possessions per game. Colorado State is looking to play super slow. 362nd in terms of total possessions per game. It's a Colorado State team that has been at home relatively solid in terms of not allowing a lot of second and third chances. Teams are grabbing only about 23.4% of their misses as an offensive rebound. Boise State has the advantage here. 7th in the country with opponents grabbing 22.2% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound. Colorado State not really looking to generate a lot of second and third chances. For Colorado State, name of the game for them is 3-point shooting. They shoot over 38.5% as a collective. That is a top 15 mark in the country. And Boise State just has not been the same defensive team that they've been in the past. Currently 158th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Now you do have a Colorado State team that's outside the top 255 with this regard as well, but Boise State is the line team to shoot about 37.4% from 3-point away from home. That's a big reason why I did have to set my line at 2. So at 1.5, I'm going to be willing to lay it with Colorado State, even though Boise State does have Drew Fielder gives you 14.5 points, 5.5 boards, and has been a 42% three-point shooter. Andrew Meadow, 39% three-point shooter with about 12 points per game. Jevin Buchanan has been able to throw in there about 12.5 points. Same with Dylan Andrews, but Andrews just feels like he has been a great fit with this team. And then for Colorado State, each of your top 4 scorers have been able to shoot over 38.5% from 3 points. As a matter of fact, over 40% for 3. With Gary Booth being able to give you 10.5 points, 5.5 rebounds per game. Brandon Rechtsteiner, 12.5 points, 2.5 assists. Kyle Jorgensen, 12 points, 2.3 assists. And then Josh Passarelli throws in their 3 assists with his 11 points per game. Colorado State having a little bit of a tough time taking care of the ball. They're outside the top 235 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, but Boise State outside the top 300 in terms of generating turnovers. I think that's enough for Colorado State to get the job done. Willing to lay the 1.5 here with Colorado State, and I like the under semi-total at a 142, 667, 668. California is on the road against Wake Forest. Wake Forest 4.5 to 6.5 point favorite. So on this game, it is 150.5, and for Cal, I only set them as a 2.5 point dog. I'm going to be willing to take the points. This opened up in a lot of places at a 4.5, so we're starting to see this increase. And for Cal, they've been a team that's been okay on the defensive glass, 120th in terms of defensive rebound percentage. Cal has been able to do a pretty good job defensively as well. They're about 58th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and for Wake Forest, 217th. Now, Wake Forest has been able to do a solid job in terms of guarding the perimeter, but they are well outside the top 300 with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, so they're absolutely getting plowed down low for Wake Forest. They're right now allowing teams to shoot from 3 points 35.4% at home. That's also outside the top 250 in the country. And for Cal, they're allowing teams to shoot 28.4% in a road/shoot court environment. That is a top 15 mark in the country, while they themselves have been a top 33-point shooting team away from home, as you've got Data Ames, who's really been the main guy for this team right now, supplying 16.5 points from 3 points. He's hoisting it up at 37.5%. John Camden shoots 40% per 3 with 14 points per game. Lee Dort is the lone guy on the roster right now that gives you over 5 rebounds per game. He's been dealing with quite a bit of ailment, but he's back in the fold. That helps us team out quite a bit. And then have a Wake Forest team that's been good in terms of generating turnovers. They're a top 45 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, but also for Cal, they've been a top 75 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. For Wake Forest, Drew Karras has really been that do-it-all sort of guy, 21.5 points, 6.5 boards. Right now shoots 34% from 3. Nate Kalmezi has been one of the main guys in the backcourt, but he's been dealing with a lot of injury himself. He's likely going to be out of the fold once again. Tried to return against Boston College, just was unable to do so. So it's been relatively rough for Wake Forest. That means that you're going to be utilizing more Miles Colvin, 12 points, not much of a facilitator, but does shoot 37% from 3-point. And for this Wake Forest group, they do shoot 77% at the free throw line. So in a pressure spot, they're good. Cal's been even better under pressure. They shoot 78.2% at the free throw line. So circumstance where I did set Cal as a 2.5 point dog, I'm going to be willing to take the points. I also did set my total out of 152.5, so I like the over. 669, 670. You've got St. Louis, and they're going to be on the road against George Mason. George Mason is a 7.5 point home underdog. 148.5 to 149.5 is the total line. I set my total here at a 149. So at a 149.5 plus, I'm going to be in on the under. Would rather have that 149.5 to the under rather than the 148.5 to the over. Even though St. Louis is a very up-tempo team, 40th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, I do think that George Mason going to look to make this thing a slog. They are 346th in terms of total possessions per game, and for George Mason, a respectable 3-point shooting defense. They allow teams to shoot 33.1% from 3 points. That's a top 135 mark in the country, and they're going to need every bit of it because this is a St. Louis team that's been going bombs away from 3 points. Numero uno, 41.7% 3-point shooting, and for St. Louis, it's very much a whole is greater than the sum of its parts sort of outlet for this team. As Robbie Avila, everyone knows about him, and he is currently the top scorer for this team. For Robbie Avila, right now he supplies you with about 13 points, 4 boards, 4 assists. He shoots 43% per 3, but then Trey Green shoots 46% per 3 with about 11 points per game. Kellen Thames, he's been able to do a nice job being able to throw in there about 10 points, 5 rebounds per game. Amari McCautry throws in there 10.5 points per contest. So you do have just weapons upon weapons for this team. And on the flip side for George Mason, you do have Jahari Long in the backcourt, who's done a great job in tandem with Corey Mincy. Both of these guys have been able to do a nice job in terms of giving the team a combined about 25 points per game. With Mincy, he's right now shooting 40% from 3 points, Long about 36.5% from the outside. And then Riley Allenpatch throws in there 14.6 rebounds per game. Emmanuel Kenga has been able to give you 5 boards. As for George Mason, they've been a top 100 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage. Overall, top 110 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Neither here nor there with their 34.9% 3-point shooting, but they've been a top 125 team in terms of taking care of the ball. It's a St. Louis team that is currently a top 20 team in terms of both points scored and points allowed on a per possession basis. So they've been rock solid there, but we have seen a little bit of, shall we say, suspect play. And for St. Louis, they're checking it outside the top 150 in terms of ball security. So I did set my line at 7. Won't take 7.5 plus here with George Mason. And at a 149.5 or higher, I'm in on the under. 671, 672. Wisconsin is going to be on the road against Purdue. Purdue is an 8.5 point favorite. Total on this game, it is 155.5 to 156.5. Won't lay with Purdue. I did set them as a favorite favorite of 9.5 points. It is a Purdue team that has been very shaky recently. No fans or buts about it, but you still have a lot of guys that are able to go bombs away from 3 in a top 5 unit in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, as Fletcher, Lawyer, Braden Smith, these two guys combined for about 28 points per game, and between the two of them, they're shooting 40% from 3. Under pressure, they both shoot above 81% at the free throw line. And with Smith, he gives you 8.7 assists per game. Wisconsin, not the sort of defense that is going to put you under duress, generate a lot of turnovers. And for this Purdue team, they, along with Wisconsin, have both been sneaky good in terms of not allowing second and third chances as well. With this Wisconsin team, in terms of their defensive rebound percentage, this team is checking in 50th in the country, with teams only grabbing about 25% of their misses as an offensive rebound. Purdue, they're currently 29th in the country, with having Oscar Trey Kaufman-Renn doing a nice job here, as they've been combining for 16 rebounds per game. Where Purdue's been fragile has been with their 2-point shooting percentage defense. They are allowing teams to really be able to have it there. They're outside the top 200 with that regard. And for Wisconsin, they're not really looking to push the ball inside. For Wisconsin, over 50% of their field goal attempts come from 3-point range, top 20 mark in the country. Now, they shoot 35.7% from 3-point range away from home. That is a top 65 mark in all of college basketball, but I do think that Purdue is going to be able to do a nice job in terms of guarding the 3-point arc here, even though you've got a pair of guys in John Blackwell and Nick Boyd who've been able to combine for about 38.5 points per game. They combine to shoot over 36% from 3-point range. Right now for Purdue, at home, they're allowing teams to shoot about 34.6% from 3. That actually goes down to 32% away from home, but I do think that split is going to be ironing out just a little bit more on them. For this Wisconsin group, you've been able to have Nolan Winter making it feel like it is cold for teams down low, as he's been able to give you 13.5 points, 8.5 rebounds per game. But outside those main 3 guys, it's been sort of a hodgepodge, with Austin Rapp, Braden Carrington, give you between 8.5 to 9.5 points per game. It is a Wisconsin team that has also been outside the top 175 with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage in the end. Even though I do think that this is going to be a little bit of a lower possession game, Purdue looking to slow things down, 328th in terms of total possessions per game. Wisconsin's cranked up the tempo. They're in the top 125 in terms of total possessions per game. That I do think that Purdue gets the job done. I did set a total here of 156.5, so that 155.5 is pretty much my max buy point on the over to go along with Purdue. 673, 674, you've got Kennesaw State. We give our road to Lane Kiffin. Go Owls are going to be on the road against New Mexico State. And New Mexico State does find themselves as 2.5-point favorites. Total on this game is 154 to 154.5. Seeing a 155.5 out there as well. And regardless, I'm going to be in on the over, as I did set my total at a 157.5. Have a Kennesaw State team that's just absolutely gunning it right now. 16th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. With New Mexico State, they're a little bit more of a mid-tempo team. They're about 213th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. New Mexico State, neither here nor there with regards to the defensive boards. They're about 156th with regards to defense rebound percentage, and the big fear here is that Kennesaw State is just going to be able to get a whole bunch of second and third chances, as right now they are grabbing about 33.8% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound. That is 37th in the country, and in games played away from home, this ascends into the top 20. For Kennesaw State, they did lose their main point guard at Simeon Cottle due to the FBI probe, but you've had R.J. Johnson in the interim be able to step up, give the team right around about 14 points, 3.5 assists. He shoots 45% from 3-point range. And then just a bevy of different rebounders. Franquan Sherman, 8.5 boards, 10 points per game. Brandon Skip-to-My-Lou is able to give you 11 points per contest. You've had Ramon Seals go down with injury, but you've got a lot of other guys that are able to help out. And for Seals, he was out for quite some time and just returned for this roster, so that helps him out quite a bit. And then on the flip side for New Mexico State, just not the same defense that they were a season ago. Last year, they were one of the best teams with regards to being able to guard the 3-point line, and right now this year for New Mexico State, they're allowing teams to shoot about 35.5% from 3-point away from home. That does go down to 29.1% at home, but here in Conference USA play, they have been giving up quite a bit from 3-point. You take a look at them overall in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and that has fallen to about 187th in the country. They have been getting a little bit lane-based down low here recently, as in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, they are now well outside the top 125 with that regard. You've got Jamel Jones, who does give you 18 points, shoots 37.5% from 3-point. Julius Mims has been able to give you about 9 boards, 11 points per game. Not a New Mexico State team that puts you under duress. They're outside the top 230 in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. They're the top 100 team in terms of taking care of the ball, and for New Mexico State, they just really have had issues being able to shoot themselves. They're outside the top 230 with their 3-point shooting percentage, outside the top 275 with their 2-point shooting percentage. Elijah Elliott has been able to supply about 8.5 points per game along Jalen Randall, but in the end, I do think that for this Kennesaw State team, they find a way on the road to be able to get the job done, and for Kennesaw State, very wackadoo split. They've actually been a much better free throw shooting team when they have been away from home rather than when they have been at home, and this New Mexico State team is very much going to put you on the free throw line. Kennesaw State, they shoot 66.4% the free throw line at home, 73.3% away from home. So set Kennesaw as the 1-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take a shot on them on the money line, and do like the over. So my total at a 157. 675, 676. Pittsburgh is on the road against Syracuse. Syracuse is a 6.5-point favorite. Total on this game, 141.5. And with Syracuse, I did set them as the favorite of 5.5 points. So I'm going to be willing to take 6+ with Pittsburgh. Both of these teams have just been very much leaking oil here recently. Syracuse, a mid-tempo team at about 150th in terms of total possessions per game. Pittsburgh, super slow at 244th. And these two teams are terrible at the free throw line. Pittsburgh, 342nd at 67.1%. And they're the best team in this game. Syracuse just 64.1% at the free throw line. Whoever the favorite would be, you just can't lay the sort of a number with either of them because you don't know if they're going to be able to close out the game at the free throw line. Now, Syracuse has the best player in this game, in my opinion, Donnie Freeman. Right now, 17 points, 7 rebounds, shoots about 32% from 3. And Nate Kings has really been able to rise up, shooting 37% from 3. In conference play, 40+%. But still, for the Syracuse team, at one point, they were a top 25 team in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Not like they're outside the top 200 or anything like that, but that is very much wilted here in the second half of the season. It's a Pittsburgh team that they themselves are leaving something to be desired. 212th in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, while Syracuse is 124th, but for Pittsburgh, they're actually giving up fewer points per possession away from home rather than at home, and I think that they're going to be able to do a good job down low with Cam Corn. Right now, give you about 13.7 rebounds per game. It's a Pittsburgh team that's shooting about 34% from 3, country average. Where they've really been losing is down low. They're outside the top 225 with regards to their 2-point shooting percentage on offense, outside the top 250 in terms of 2-point shooting percentage of defense, not allowing a lot of second and third chances, top 75 unit in terms of defensive rebound percentage, with having Roman Sapula be able to give you about 10 points, 5.5 rebounds per game. Barry Dunning has been able to get her Dunning with about 12.5 points, 6 rebounds per game, but I do think that this is going to be a little bit of, shall we say, a slog in this one. I set my total at a 141.5, so I'm going to be willing to take the points here with Pittsburgh. And right now, I'm mostly seeing 141.5 to 142, 142 or higher. I'm in on the under. 677, 678. Wyoming is going to be on the road against San Jose State. Old St. Josie State is a underdog at home of 6.5 points. 148.5 to 149.5 is the total line. I did set my total 143.5. I like the under for Wyoming overall for the season. They are, in terms of total possessions, range 249th. They were about 85th in the country at Christmas, so they have really slowed down. San Jose State 322nd in terms of total possessions per game, and San Jose State's defense has not been good. 356th in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Wyoming, respectable. They're about 165th. They are giving up about 11 points more per 100 possessions when they're away from home rather than at home, and for Wyoming, they've been able to excel on the offensive glass. They rebound 32% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound. That's a top 75 mark in the country, and right now for San Jose State, this team is getting absolutely wrecked down low. They're a bottom 30 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. In terms of defensive rebound percentage, they're well outside the top 325 with that regard. Now, you've got the best overall scorer in this game, Kobe Garland, who's been able to give you 20 points, 4.5 assists, shoots 39% for 3, and then you've been able to get some good production out of Adrian Myers, 10.5 points, 4.5 boards. He shoots about 37% from 3-point range, but outside those two main guys, you just don't have necessarily a ton with this team. It's a San Jose State team that, in terms of their own 2-point shooting percentage, is also outside the top 300 as well, so they leave something to be desired on that front end. You do have a Wyoming team that has been a top 135 team in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. They only shoot about 33% themselves, but a top 125 team in terms of being able to just execute down low. Now, I could only set them as a 5.5-point favorite. They shoot about 73.8% the free throw line. Neither here nor there. There's a lot of meh with this Wyoming team. You've got Nasir Meyer with about 13 points, 4.5 boards, and Lowen Walker is a 14-point per game scorer. He only shoots about 30% from 3-point. Caden Bennett, 10.5 points, 5 rebounds. He's actually your top rebounder on this team as well, and it is a Wyoming team that's been a little bit over the place with their offense. They're averaging about 13.4 points fewer per 100 possessions when they're away from home rather than at home, and for Wyoming, they do shoot just 29.5% from 3-point away from home. San Jose State, they do shoot 38% at home. I think that that's enough for them to remain lively, so at 6+, taking the points with San Jose State, and I'm going to be in on the underside by total 143.5, 679, 680. You've got Baylor, and they're going to be playing us to Utah. Utah is a double-figure underdog here of 12.5 to 13.5 points. The last game, 149.5 to 115.5. Made my line 12, so I'm going to be willing to take the points with Utah. Utah's actually been shooting better from 3-point range away from home rather than at home. 36.9% away from home, 33.9% in their home games. Baylor has some pretty good home and road splits for themselves. They shoot 37% from 3-point range at home. That goes on about 32.5% away from home. And Baylor's been amazing in terms of giving themselves second and third chances. They are 18th in the country with grabbing 35.3% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound. And Utah's not going to put you under any sort of duress whatsoever. Utah's outside the top 285 in terms of points allowed allowed on a per possession basis, outside the top 325 in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. And for Baylor, you've got Cameron Carr, who's been able to give you about 19 points, 5.5 boards, shoots 39% from 3. Isaac Williams has been able to shoot 46.5% from the outside with about 10.5 points per game. Tone Yusufu does a little bit of everything. Paris Steele, 17.5 points per game, but it is also a Baylor team that has been giving it up from three-point range. They're outside the top 240 in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage. They're also outside the top 175 in terms of defensive rebound percentage. For Baylor, they're not really putting you under duress either. They're well outside the top 235 in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. Utah's one main rebounder in Keno Dallas, who's been able to give you 12.5 points, 9 rebounds per game, like what Terrence Brown brings to the table with about 20 points. He shoots in the mid-30s from 3. Dominic Henry has been coming on strong from the outside, shooting 39.5% from 3. With Utah, they are getting absolutely killed down low. They're outside the top 275 with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, so that's been a big giant issue for Utah. Not going to give themselves a lot of second and third chances, but I mean, they're a country average team in terms of taking care of the ball. I do think that Utah, with their outside shooting, going to be able to do just enough to hold in this game and very much help you out to the over, as you do have a Utah team that is not looking to play super up-tempo, but they're not super slow. Baylor 125th in terms of total possessions per game, Utah 185th. So set a total of 154. I'm going to be willing to take 12.5 plus here with Utah, and I'm going to be in on this total over as well. 681, 682. You've got Indiana on the road against Ohio State, and the Ohio State University, a 4.5 point favorite total on this game. It is 148.5 to 149.5, and I'm going to be willing to take a shot here on the under. You have an Indiana team that's not looking to push a lot of tempo in terms of total possessions, bringing 253rd in all of college basketball, with Ohio State 245th. So I set a total more around a 145.5 here. You've got a Ohio State team that's not really fighting for a lot of second and third chances, and Indiana definitely is not. For Ohio State, they're about 189th in terms of offensive rebound percentage. Indiana's 303rd. Now, I did set my line at 3.5. I'm going to be willing to take 4 plus. You do have an Ohio State team that is doing a lot of little things well. At the free throw line, they're shooting 77%. That is a top 35 mark in the country. They also have been able to do a nice job in terms of guarding the arc. The teams are shooting 31.3% against them. Top 55 team in the country, but they have been just not necessarily the world's greatest team in terms of being able to defend down low. They're outside the top 180 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. Indiana is a top 50 team with their own 2-point shooting percentage. Bruce Thornton, best overall scorer in this game, in my opinion. 20 points, 5 boards, 4 assists, shoots 39.5% for 3. Getting back John Mobley is massive. He shoots 43% from 3-point with about 16 points per contest. And then on the flip side, you've got an Indiana unit that has been able to have Tucker DeVries do a little bit of everything for the team. 14 points, 5 boards, 3 assists, shoots 34% from 3. And then Lamar Wilkerson, he averages 21 points. He shoots 38.5% from 3 points for an Indiana team that is shooting about 34.8% from 3-point range. Neither here nor there. You've got an Ohio State team that's been a little bit up, down, all around. And for Indiana, they do shoot closer to 32.7% away from home. Ohio State, they shoot about 36.5% from 3-point range in their home games, but Indiana's another team that's great at the free throw line at 78.3% for Indiana. They have been a top 70 team with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, and Ohio State has been a top 52-point shooting percentage team, so it's an interesting circumstance. I think that the defense is going to be able to hold up here. I like the under, so I told 145.5, and at 4 plus, I'm willing to take those points with Indiana. 683, 684, Texas A&M going to be on the road against LSU, and LSU does find themselves as a home underdog here, as you're going to be catching with them 3.5 points total this game. It is 158.5 to 159.5, and with Texas A&M, I made them a favorite of 5.5 points, so I'm going to be willing to lay the number. Texas A&M has been really good with regards to their 3-point shooting percentage this season. Right now, they're shooting about 36.8% as a collective. That is 36th in all of college basketball. LSU has been well outside the top 200 all season long, even when they had D-Don Thomas in the lineup, and A&M also does a great job in terms of guarding the arc when they're away from home. In games played away from home, Texas A&M is a line team to shoot 28.1% from 3-point range. That is a top 3 mark in all of college basketball. And I'm not necessarily going to be a team that puts you under tons of duress with regards to their great rebounding or anything like that. With A&M 162nd with regards to rebound percentage. LSU has been a little bit better on the glass at about 104th, and you've got Max McKinnon, who's done a nice job, give you 15 plus points, 2.5 assists. He shoots just a hair below 40% from 3-point range, but without Thomas, it's a little bit of mixing and shaking out there in the backcourt. You've been able to get about 2.5, 3 assists per contest of Jalen Reese, so he's been able to do a nice job there, but he only gives you about 5 points per game. You do have rebounders as Pablo Tamba, Markel Sun both give you 7.3 rebounds per game between the two of them, about 21.5 points per contest, but on the flip side, for the Texas A&M group, I do think that they're going to be able to do a nice job dominating this game. Rashawn Agee down low, being able to give you about 14.5 points, 9 rebounds, makes it a little bit easier on that front. You've got Rylan Griffin, Ruben Dominguez, both shooting 41% for 3 with a combined 22 points per contest. Zach Clements has been able to throw in there 7 points, and he had 6'10", himself, shooting over 40% from 3-point range. A&M in a pressure spot. They do shoot 74% at the free throw line. they are giving it up on the inside. They're outside the top 225 with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. And LSU, they've been looking to get a lot of their buckets on the inside. They also shoot 77% at the free throw line, but also with this LSU team, they're well outside the top 3 in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. So clean possessions to be had for A&M, and I think that helps you to the over. So I like the over sub. I told 161.5, and I'm all the way up to 5 here with A&M. 685, 686, big game between North Carolina and Duke. Duke is a home favorite of 17 to 17.5 points. 146.5 to 147.5 is the total. So I told 146.5. So 147 plus. I'm in on the under. I just have to take the points here with North Carolina. With Duke, they're obviously number 1 in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, top 5 team in terms of points per possession. One thing that they're not necessarily amazing with is their 3-point shooting percentage. They shoot 35.5% from 3, so it's not like they're terrible or anything like that. That's a top 85 mark in the country, but still not necessarily what you'd totally expect out of them. Cameron Boozer has been able to give you a double-double, 22.5 points, 10 boards, 4 assists, shoots 40% from 3, and then Caleb Foster has become a 40% 3-point shooter with about 8.5 points per game. Duke is just allowing nothing easy on defense. They're in the top 25 in terms of opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. They're second in the country in terms of fewest free throw attempts allowed on a per-game basis. But this is a North Carolina team that's been pretty stout themselves down low. They're a top 20 team with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, albeit Caleb Wilson is out of the fold, and it looks like his season's done. But Henry Visar, 16.5 points, 8.5 boards, a little bit over a block per contest. Luka Brogdanovic, he has been able to step up in a big way, 10 points. He's right now shooting about 36% from 3. North Carolina has become a country average team. They're shooting 34.5% from 3, so we've seen a little bit of a come up there. They're finishing on the inside, top 50 team with regards to their 2-point shooting percentage, and Duke not fouling a lot. That's honestly not a bad thing for North Carolina. They only shoot about 68.5% at the free throw line. North Carolina themselves are a top 10 team in terms of fewest free throw attempts on a per possession basis allowed. Now, North Carolina is not going to put you under duress. They're outside the top 330 in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, but they're valuing the ball. They're a top 35 team in terms of fewest turnovers per possession. Seth Trimble has been able to give you double figures, and this should be a game that is relatively mid-tempo. For North Carolina, in terms of total possessions, bringing 165th. Duke has sold themselves down this year to about 264. So I do like the under sub. I total 146.5, and I'm going to take the points with North Carolina. I did set them as an underdog of 12.5 points, 687, 688. You got Cal State Bakersfield. Meet the Road Runners are going to be on the road against Cal Poly, and Cal Poly does find themselves as a favorite of 9.5 points. So on this game, you're going to be getting this at a 171.5 to a 172.5, and I do like the under. I set my total at 164. Now, recognize that both of these teams are pushing tempo. Cal Poly leads the country in terms of total possessions, bringing the Meet Road Runners. They are 24th, but for our good friends the Road Runners, they are just not putting points upon the board. In terms of points scored on a per possession basis, 336th, and they are a top 25 team in terms of percentage of their field goal attempts that come from inside the 3-point line, and yet they're outside the top 320 with that 2-point shooting percentage. They don't shoot it well from 3-point range. They have been relatively solid at being able to hit free throws, but that's about all that they do well, and they've been dealing with injuries all throughout the season. CJ Hardy was missing for about 10 or so games. That's one of your top 3-point shooters. He is back. He's give you about 13 points, 4 boards per contest. Zaylen Smith, 16.5 points per game. He's your top scorer, and then Ron Jessamy, 13.5 points, 6.5 boards, nearly 2 blocks per contest. That helps out a little bit, but it's also a Bakersfield team that's allowing teams to shoot about 35.5% from 3 outside the top 3, and they're ranked Cal Poly 5th in the country in terms of percentage of their field goal attempts that come from 3-point range. And for Cal Poly, they themselves have had a big time issue in terms of taking care of the ball. They're outside the top 340 in terms of the turnovers on a per possession basis on offense. And for Cal Poly, they've been honestly shooting it better from 3-point range when they've been away from home rather than at home. 31.3% at home, 34.8% away from home, but you still have a guy in Hamad Musa who I really like, giving you about 20 points, 6.5 boards. Caden Ward has been able to throw in their 14 points per game. I like Peter Benjai supplying 13.5 points. He shoots about 37% from 3-point range. You've had Jaso Isis, who's been able to come in for about 7 or 8 games. He was dealing with injury all throughout the season, and he's been able to provide a shot in the arm with about 8.5 points per game and a little bit more depth for a team that plays very, very up-tempo, with Bakersfield not executing on pretty much anything whatsoever. I think the Cal Poly gets the job done. I think that you get an under here. So semi-line at 12, willing to lay with Cal Poly, and I do like the under semi-total 164. 689, 690. You got Abilene Christian, and they're going to be playing us to UT Arlington. UT Arlington, an underdog of 1.5 points. Still on this game, it is 135 to 135.5, and with Abilene Christian, I did set them as the underdog of 2 points. I actually like UT Arlington here on the money line. Now, for Arlington, if you do have this team in a pressure spot, man, are they not great at the free throw line. As for UT Arlington, they're overall shooting about 71.3%. The charity stripe outside the top 200 in all of college basketball there, and they're not a great 3-point shooting team at 29%. That's a bottom 10 mark in the country, but this is also a team that's been been a top 100 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. They're not quite on the Abilene Christian level. Abilene Christian, they're a top 10 team with this regard, but both of these teams are outside the top 340 in terms of their own ball security. Abilene Christian has not been able to really execute on the inside. Abilene Christian is actually not allowing a ton of second and third chances, but this UT Arlington team, in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, they are 47th in the country, and Abilene Christian does not fight for the second and third chances. They're about 183rd in all of college basketball. You have Marcel McCreary for Arlington, give you 13 points, 5 boards. He shoots about 33% for 3, pretty much the lone guy in the roster. That shoots about 31% for 3. Kashmir Chavis has been able to come on strong with about 10.5 points, 3.5 assists per game. Rayshon Spencer, about 12.5 points, 6.5 rebounds per game. Meanwhile, for Abilene Christian, you've had Braden Hubbard really be the main man for this team. 16 points, 4.5 boards, and now he shoots about 33.5% from three-point. Gianna Rivera has been able to shoot 34% from the outside. Childarian Newton has been able to give you about 10 points per contest. So these guys have been able to do a pretty rock-solid job here. For Abilene Christian, they're just getting absolutely tattooed when they don't generate turnover, though. They're a bottom 15 team in the country in terms of opponents' three-point shooting percentage. They're outside the top 275, both with their own two-point shooting percentage and opponents' two-point shooting percentage as well, and if they're in a pressure spot, they only shoot about 70.3% at the free throw line. You've got a pair of teams that are not looking to push a lot of tempo. Right now for Arlington, 247th in terms of total possessions per game. Abilene Christian, they are clocking in about 161st. So I did set my line at a 132 with regards to the total. I like the under, and I do like UT Arlington here. I'll write on the money line. 691, 692. Providence is on the road against Georgetown. Georgetown does find themselves as a 1 to 1.5 point favorite. 157.5 to 159 is a total. And with Providence, I did set them as an underdog of 4 points. So I'm going to be willing to lay with Georgetown. Providence just absolutely gunning it right now in terms of total possessions per game, 10th, and we know now that Kim English is not going to be coming back next year, so I have to wonder how much motivation there's going to be for this team. You might have a spirited set of guys that want to prove their coach right. Meanwhile, you might have a bunch of guys that quit. You're probably not going to get something in between, but that said, you do have Jason Edwards, Jalen Sellers. These two guys combined for about 35 points per game. These guys have pro aspirations. With Edwards, shoots about 34.5% from 3. Sellers shoots 43% from 3-point. And then Stefan Box has been able to throw in their 15 points per game. Shoots about 32.5% from the outside, where Providence is just getting killed, though, is from the outside. They're outside the top 285 with regards to opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. Not terrible down low. Top 125 team with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. And for Providence, they are finishing down low. They've been a top 75 team with regards to their own 2-point shooting percentage. They're lying second and third chances like crazy, though. This is a Georgetown team that should be able to feast there with Vincent Iwuchukwu. 10 points, 6 boards, true 7-footer that's able to give you a steal and a block per contest. For Providence, they are about 167th in the country in terms of defensive rebound percentage. Georgetown, they've had a few issues here as well. They're allowing teams to grab about 29.5% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound, but you do have the Mac attack and Malik Mack, who's been able to do a good job with KJ Lewis in terms of leading the way, in terms of scoring. These two guys have been able to combined for about 28.5 points per game, and then you've been able to get a little bit more outside shooting recently out of Caleb Williams. He shoots 38% from 3, 9 points per contest. No, not the Bears quarterback. And for Georgetown, they do a nice job in terms of valuing the ball. They're a top 95 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. In a pressure spot, they do shoot about 73.5% at the free throw line. This is a Providence team that they follow quite a bit. Georgetown, not necessarily the greatest shooting team. They're outside the top 220 with regards to their 2-point shooting percentage, outside the top 235 with regards to their 3-point shooting percentage, but they are allowing teams to shoot just 33% from 3. I think that defense for Georgetown going to be able to win out, and I think they get very much an up and down game that has some late fouls. So I did set my line at 4. I'm going to be willing to lay with Georgetown, and I do like the over. So my total 164, 693, 694. Fresno State, they're going to be on the road against Grand Canyon. Grand Canyon does find themselves as a 13.5 point favorite. Total on this game, it is 146.5 to 147.5. With Grand Canyon, made them a 10-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take the points. I just don't have enough faith in Grand Canyon to cover this number because the offense just has not been great. Defense has been superb with this Grand Canyon team. You take a look at them in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and Grand Canyon is 32nd in all of college basketball. Fresno State has been giving it up down low. They've been outside the top 250 with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. They've actually been a really good 3-point shooting defense. They're about 111th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Right now for Fresno State, they're allowing teams to shoot just 30.4% from 3-point range. It is a Grand Canyon team that shoots a little bit better from 3-point range when they're at home rather than away from home, but both of these teams are leaving quite a bit of something to be desired. With their outside shooting, Fresno State, they shoot about 32.5% from 3-point range. With Grand Canyon, they're shooting about 31.3%. Does go up to 33.7% in their home games, but for Grand Canyon, right now, the big thing for this team is being able to find a little bit of help for Jaden Henley with regards to that top scoring role, as Henley is right now giving you about 18 points, 6 boards, 3 assists per contest. Really doesn't pop it well from 3. Mekhi Williams is your lone other double-figure scorer with about 14 points. Shoots 34% from 3. Brian Moore Jr. has been able to give you some more. Shoots about 37% from the outside. He supplies about 9 points per game. And then Nana Wusu-Anane has been able to give you 9 points, 8.5 boards, about a steal and a half per contest as well. And then on the flip side of things, you've got a Fresno State team that has been able to have Woolgans Jaquez be able to do a nice job down low with him. He's been able to give you about 8.5 points, 8.8 rebounds per game. Jake Heidbreder has been your main scorer with about 17 points per game. And with Zayon Collins, he supplies about 11.5 points, 4.5 assists per contest. Fresno State has been a country average team with their 2-point shooting percentage. They do shoot about 74% of the free throw line, and Grand Canyon is a team that'll put you on the free throw line a little bit. Fresno State having a tough time taking care of the ball outside the top 275 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis. Meanwhile, you've got Grand Canyon. They're outside the top 250 as well. So do think that you get a sloppy Joe sort of game. Did set my total here at a 144. So I like the under and the points with Fresno State. 695, 696. Cal State Fullerton is going to be on the road facing off against CSUN. Cal State Northridge is a 5.5 point favorite. 169.5 is the total line with Northridge. I did set them as a favorite of 5.5 points. So at a 5 or less, I'm going to be willing to lay it. It's a Fullerton team that's been really good in terms of generating turnovers, in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. This team is right now checking in right around about 46th in the country, and they are gunning it. They are 7th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. CSUN, even more ridiculous. They are 3rd in the country in terms of total possessions per game. And for CSUN, they're going to have a nice edge on the glass because this is a Fullerton bunch that they just don't grab second and third chances outside the top 275 with that regard. And CSUN, 33rd in the country in terms of defensive rebound percentage with this Fullerton team. They've been able to get quite a bit out of Jefferson de la Cruz Monegro, who's been able to supply about 12 points, 2.5 assists per contest. Josh Ward is your top scorer with 15 points. Shoots about 32% from 3-point range for this Fullerton team outside the top 300 with regards to offensive rebound percentage, so have their issues there. Not bad on the inside. They're a top 150 team with regards to their 2-point shooting percentage. They're doing a relatively solid job taking care of the ball, but they are getting absolutely tattooed on the inside. This Fullerton team is outside the top 320 with regards to opponent's 2-point shooting percentage, and Northridge has not knocked your socks off with their 3-point shooting at right around about 32.6%. They've been better on the inside with Larry Hughes being the main man for this team, shooting 40% from 3, 17.5 points per game. Josh O'Garrow, 14.5 points, 9.5 rebounds. Josiah Davis has been able to throw in their 7 assists per game. He does turn the ball over 4.7 times per game, and it is a CSUN team that has been well outside the top 285 in terms of turnovers on a per-possession basis, so they've done a bad job in terms of taking care of the ball. And if you do have a kryptonite with the CSUN team, they're looking to close out a game. They shoot 65.8% at the free throw line. That is a bottom 10 mark in all of college basketball. Not to say that Fullerton has been magical with their free throw shooting percentage. They're at 71.2%, but that does help them out a little bit. But with the way that CSUN has been able to do a nice job locking down low, I think that you're going to get very much an up and down game. So I did set my total 169.5. I think that this is close enough for late fellas. Seeing a 168.5 out there. Now I'm seeing a 170.5 out there as well now. Personally, between a 168.5 to a 170.5, I would rather have the 170.5 to the under rather than the 168.5 to the over. And with CSUN, I'm going to be willing to lay up to 5 with them. 697, 698. Cal Baptist is going to be playing on the road against Southern Utah. Southern Utah, a home underdog of 5.5 to 6 points, and total house game, you're going to be getting it at a 145.5, and I did set this total right here at a 147. I do like the over, mainly because Southern Utah is just getting destroyed on the defensive side of things, and Southern Utah does look to play up tempo. They're about 69th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Cal Baptist is not the biggest nail in the world, but they're about 219th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and it's a Cal Baptist team that's really been able to do a great job on the glass. They're in the top 75 with regards to defensive rebound percentage. In terms of percentage of their missed shots to become an offensive rebound, they're a top 20 team in the country, and Southern Utah is outside the top 300 in terms of defensive rebound percentage. Teams are grabbing 31.4% of their misses as an offensive rebound, and that's a big reason why I'm willing to lay it here with Cal Baptist. I did set them as a 7-point favorite. You've got Thomas Endong along with Brady Henjai, who combine for about 12.5 rebounds per game. They combine for less than 12 points per game, but they just do a great job on the glass. And then Dominique Daniels, a low 33-point shooter, but he's able to give the team 22 points per game. You've been able to have Montel Williams be able to give you about 13 points. He's been shooting in the mid-30s from 3-point range, and this is a Southern Utah team as well outside the top 300 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They've been a country average team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, getting destroyed from the outside. They're allowing teams to shoot 36.5% from 3. They don't put you under duress or outside the top 275 in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, while they themselves are outside the top 340 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis on offense. To have Elijah Duvall, 14.5 points, 3.5 assists, shooting about 33% from 3. Jaden Farrell has been able to give you 13 points, 6.5 boards. He shoots 41% from 3-point range. Isaiah Cottrell has been able to give you about 6 rebounds per game. game as well. But with all that this Cal Baptist team brings to the table, Cal Baptist, if they do have to cover at the free throw line, not necessarily the world's greatest free throw shooting team at 71.5%, but not awful there. And with this Cal Baptist team being able to just completely control the boards, being a top 50 team with regards to opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage, I think that they just smother in this game. So I did set my line at a 7, so I'm going to lay with Cal Baptist, and I'm going to be in on this total over as well. Set my total at 147, 699, 700 on the card. You've got Texas A&M. They are back to playing host to Oklahoma. Boomer Sooner does find themselves as a underdog here of 7.5 to 8 points. So on this game, 153.5 to 154.5, and with Oklahoma, I did set them as an underdog of 5.5 points. I'm going to be willing to take the points. It is an Oklahoma team that's still a top 35 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. They shoot 37.2% for three. That's a top 35 mark in the country. Meanwhile, you've got a Texas group that they've been a neither here nor there 3-point shooting team, especially at home. They only shoot 33.1% from 3-point, but where they've really been able to excel is being able to grab second and third chances. This is a Texas team that's 20th in the country with grabbing 35.2% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound. You've had Mateus Volkatatis, who's been able to do a nice job, give you 7+ rebounds per game, and then Dalen Swain has been Mr. Do-It-All for the team. Comes over with Sean Miller from Xavier. He's supplying 17.5 points, 7.5 boards, shoots 34% from 3-point range, and then you've been able to have Jordan Pope shoot 37% for 3, 12.5 points per game. Additionally, you've had Cameron Heide be able to shoot 47% for 3, albeit on relatively low volume. On the flip side for Oklahoma, you do have two guys that are able to just really take over the game in the backcourt, as you've got Xavier Brown coupled with Nigel Pack, who've been able to combine for just under 32 points per game with Pack. He packs it in at about 45% from 3-point. Both shoot above 86% at the free throw line as well. It is an Oklahoma team that's getting destroyed on the inside. They're outside the top 280 with regards to defensive rebound percentage. In terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, they're outside the top 180 with that regard as well. But you do have Tay Davis, who's able to give you 12 points, 5.5 rebounds per game, and then Mohamed Wagiu has been able to throw in their 7 boards per contest as well. I do think that with the overall just efficiency of Oklahoma, they're also a top 65 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, and to have a Texas team that they themselves have been outside the top 75 with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. With Texas, they're not going to put you under duress outside the top 300 in terms of generating turnovers. That allows Oklahoma to remain lively. So my total 157.5. So I like the over and the points here with Boomer Sooner. 701, 702. Auburn is going to be on the road against Alabama, and Alabama does find themselves as a favorite here of 8.5 points, and your total, that is between 176 to 176.5, and I did set a total of 173.5. I do like the under, mainly because even though you've got two teams that are up-tempo, that are really playing no defense whatsoever. Auburn's about 108th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and then Alabama, shock, surprise, surprise, they're back in the top 5 in terms of total possessions per game. That with Auburn, they're not necessarily the world's greatest 3-point shooting team. Now, I do think that they do enough to hold in this game because they're the better rebounding team, as for Auburn, you've got a double-double machine, and Keyshawn Hall has been able to give you about 7 boards, 20.5 points, shoots 39.5% from 3, and Auburn has been a top 15 team in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, and their specialty is getting to the free throw line. They are second in the country in terms of free throw attempts on a per game basis, to be able to offset the fact that they've been a rather pedestrian 3-point shooting team, with Taj Bedford only shooting 29% from 3. But that said, it is an Alabama team that's a little bit hit or miss with their outside shooting. Obviously, they take a bunch of threes at home. Over 57% of their field goal attempts come from 3, and it's an Auburn team that's outside the top 300 with regards to their 3-point shooting percentage defense. They're allowing teams to shoot over 37% from the outside, so that's obviously a little bit of an issue. LeBaron Filan, 21.5 points, he shoots 39.5% for 3. Aiden Holloway shoots 43% for 3. He's up to about 16.5 points per contest. Aiden Sherrill has been able to give you about 11 points, 6 rebounds per game. And I mean, with Alabama, they don't do the world's worst job in terms of not allowing clean looks. They're a top 75 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. A lot of teams who shoot 33% for 3. They just don't put you under duress. They're a bottom 15 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. They allow 14.2 offensive rebounds per game. That is the highest mark in all of college basketball. I think that is going to be just enough for Auburn to remain lively in an up and down game. So my total 173.5. I think that 176.5 it just went a little bit of a hair too far, so I'm in on the under and the points with Auburn. 703, 704. Utah Valley is on the road against Utah Tech, and Utah Tech does find themselves as a 6.5 point home underdog. Total on this game 147.5 to 148.5, and with Utah Valley, I did set them as a 7-point favorite, so I'm going to be willing to lay the 6.5. Now, with the Utah Valley, if you have one main concern for this team, they turn the ball over a ton outside the top 35 in terms of ball security, but they give themselves second and third chances. They're a top 45 team in terms of their defensive rebound percentage. It is a Utah Tech team that's been actually really good in terms of guarding the 3-point line. With Utah Tech, they're allowing teams to shoot from 3-point range only 29.4%. At home, that goes down to 27.1%, but not a team that's going to put you under any sort of duress whatsoever. Utah Tech is about 164th in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. Utah Valley is up to 8th, so they've been able to do a remarkable job there. And for this Utah Tech team, while the three-point shooting defense has been much better than it has been in the past, you've seen the three-point shooting offense go downward a little bit as well. So typically, this is a team that's pretty solid from three. You've been able to have Noah Belonga along with Ethan Potter be able to combine for about 27 points per game. You have to like Jashawn Holt shooting 42% from three-point, and Chance Trujillo is up to about 35% three-point shooting. Trujillo along with Holt combined for 24 points per game, and Potter, he does give you 8 rebounds per game, but this team is currently outside the top 275 in terms of offensive rebound percentage, and they're just giving up second and third chances like crazy. Utah Valley, they're a team that in games played away from them is in the top 100 in terms of defensive rebound percentage. Utah Tech, they're in 34th. In home games, they're allowing teams to grab 32.4% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound. Meanwhile, you've got Jackson Holcomb for this Utah Valley team, who's been able to do a really good job in terms of supplying the team with about 15 points, 7 rebounds per game. Trayvon Leonard has been able to throw in their 12 points, 6 assists per contest. Tyler Hendricks shoots 45% from three. It's a country average team with Utah Valley with regards to their three-point shooting percentage, but they're just absolutely dominating on the inside. They're a top 30 team with regards to opponents' two-point shooting percentage. With their own two-point shooting percentage, they are 27th in the country. Meanwhile, Utah Tech not necessarily doing the world's greatest job of executing down low either. Right now, they are about 119th with their own two-point shooting percentage. So I do think that allows Utah Valley to be able to go on the road, get the job done, and now we're eligible for the NCAA tournament once again as well. Semi-line at 7. I'm going to be willing to lay it with Utah Valley. Made a total of 147, so 140 plus. I'm in on the under. 7-5, 7-6. UC San Diego is going to be on the road against UC Santa Barbara with the Gauchos. They do find themselves as a 2.5 point favorite. 139.5 to 140.5 is the total line with UC San Diego. I set them as an underdog, 4.5 points. I'm going to be willing to lay it. It's a San Diego team that's actually shot it better from three-point range when they've been away from home rather than at home, and for San Diego, a moderately up-tempo team, 133rd in terms of total possessions per game. Santa Barbara is 228th. Santa Barbara has been rough with regards to their overall three-point shooting defense outside the top 225 there. They don't allow second and third chances, though. With Santa Barbara, their line teams to grab only about 23.3% of their misses as an offensive rebound. That's a top 15 mark in the country. San Diego, to their credit, they've been in the top 65 with this regard as well. And for Santa Barbara, they've had to overcome the injury to Mario Little, so that's been a little bit of an issue. Meanwhile, for Santa Barbara, you've been able to get good production in the interim without him out of Ada Mahaney. Mahaney has become that top scorer with about 15 points, 3 assists. He shoots 40% from three. Colin Smith shoots about 41% from the outside, 12 points per game. Zion Sensley has been able to give you about 7.5 boards, 11.5 points per game. And additionally, you've got Marvin McGee, who's been a little bit up and down, but he's been seeing some more minutes recently for this UC San Diego team. Leo Beth has been the top scorer for this team as he's been able to supply the team with about 12 points per game. We have seen San Diego be a little bit more lackadaisical with that three-point shooting, but they've been good on the inside. They're a top 75 team in terms of opponents' two-point shooting percentage, top 95 team with their own two-point shooting percentage. Not a team that's going to put you under duress, and San Diego doesn't give themselves a lot of second and third chances. You also have to be mindful that they just don't shoot it well at the free throw line. 69%, that's well outside the top 250 in all of college basketball. Last time these two teams played, Santa Barbara actually won that game 62-48. I think that's going to be a little bit higher scoring here as you've got Alex Tolkien shooting 42% from three-point range, and he throws in there about 10 points per contest. Bull Dango has been able to give you about 11 points per contest as well, but I do think that in this ordeal with Santa Barbara not allowing those second and third chances, and Santa Barbara is a team that's a little bit better in terms of being able to close out a game. They do shoot 76% at the free throw line, that they do find a way at home to be able to get the job done, and Santa Barbara is actually pushing teams to the inside, even though they have been rough with regards to their three-point shooting percentage defense. They do try to pile drive you on the inside, so it is a circumstance where I set Santa Barbara as a 4.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number and made my total 142.5, so I'm in on the over. 707, 708. UCLA is going to be on the road against USC, and USC does find themselves as a home underdog of 5.5 points. 150.5 to 151.5 is the total. I set a total here of a 147. I do like the under. With USC, it's been just a rough go of it for them recently. You've got Chad Baker-Mazara no longer with the team. Rodney Rice was obviously dealing with an injury. They are still a top 30 team in terms of total possessions per game. I have to think that they look to slow down a little bit. You still have Ezra Uzar, who's able to give you 15 plus points, 6 plus rebounds per game. Jacob Kofi has been able to give you multiple blocks per game. You've got the 7'3" big man and Gabe Dines, who gives you a block per contest, and it's a UCLA team that they thrive on three-point shooting. They shoot 37.8% from the outside, top 25 mark in all of college basketball, but for USC, there are a lot of teams who shoot just 30.1% from three. That is actually a top 25 mark in the country, so I think that helps you out to the under, especially with this UCLA team just not really pushing a lot of tempo right now. They're about 293rd in the country in terms of total possessions per game. They really don't fight for second and third chances. They're outside the top 200 with regards to offensive rebound percentage, and UCLA is well outside the top 230 135 with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. I think that helps out USC in this spot. I could only set UCLA as a 3-point favorite, even though you do now have Sky Clark back, who's been shooting 46.5% from 3, 12.5 points per game. As a matter of fact, out of your top 4 scorers, only Donovan Dent, who gives you 13 points, 7.5 assists per game, shoots below 42.6% from 3. Tyler Bilodeau, 86% free throw shooter, 18 points per game. But for USC, even though it's been all sorts of sloppy, they've had a tough time taking care of the ball. UCLA just not the same team that they have been in the past. In terms of generating turnovers, they're hardly in the top 125. In terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, I think that USC with the injuries are going to be looking to slow things down. So I'm going to be willing to take the points with USC. I like the under. Semi-total at a 147. 709, 710. You've got Minnesota and a state with the small strengths in the union. Minnesota is going to be playing us to Northwestern. Northwestern is a underdog of 3 to 4 points. Total on this game 133 to 134. And with Minnesota, I did set them as a favorite of 5.5 points. So I'm going to be willing to lay the number with Northwestern. It is a group that has been very good in terms of being able to take care of the ball. They're a top 5 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, but you've got a Minnesota team that's just been completely different when they've been at home rather than away from home. In home games, they're allowing teams to grab only about 23.1% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound. It is a Minnesota team that's either here nor there in terms of taking care of the ball, but for Minnesota, in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis away from home, they are well outside the top 300 in all of college basketball. In their home games, this ascends into the top 40. And for Northwestern, even though they've been a relatively good perimeter defense, they're getting killed on the inside. They're overall 189th in the country with regards to points allowed on a per possession basis. And for Minnesota, I do think that you're going to be able to get some good production out of Cade Tyson, who's able to give you 19.5 points, 5.5 boards. He shoots 43% from 3-point. You've also been able to Bobby Durkin shoots 39% from 3. They've been dealing with the injury to Jalen Crocker-Johnson, but Langston Reynolds, Isaac Kusama, they do a nice job doling out the ball, 8.3 assists per game. And it's not the same Northwestern team that was generating a bunch of turnovers a few seasons ago as well. With this Minnesota team, they are a team that is outside the top 175 with regards to opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentages. But again, much better when they've been at home. And you've got a Northwestern team that is really reliant upon Nick Martinelli. And he has been tremendous for the team, 22.5 points, 6 boards from 3-point, shoots 42% from 3. Pretty much the lone out of their top 5 scorers that shoots above 32.5% from 3. Outside of Martinelli, you don't have a single guy that gives you over 5 rebounds per game with Northwestern. They're outside the top 275 with regards to their offensive rebound percentage. They're also about outside the top 240 with their 3-point shooting percentage. Northwestern, they're about a country average team with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, but they are giving up a lot of second and third chances. I think that is going to be paramount in this game. Northwestern, when they can get to the free throw line, they shoot 75% at the charity stripe, and if Minnesota needs to cover at the free throw line, they do shoot just 69.7% at the free throw line, but Minnesota, a completely different animal at home. I think that they get the job done. I think they get late fouls for the over. So my total 134.5, like the over, and with Minnesota, we'll lay up to 5 with them. 7-11, 7-12. You got UC Davidson. They're going to be on the road against UC Irvine. Zaza, the Anteaters, are 9 to 9.5 point favorites. So this game, 145.5 to 146.5. And with Irvine, I did set them as an 8-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to take the points. With UC Davis, they have been a solid team in terms of generating turnovers. And just on defense, this is a UC Davis team that has been a top 130 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, top 85 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. Irvine, just great with their defense. They're 7th in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They are number 1 in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. Irvine, with their own 2-point shooting percentage at home, though, is outside the top 3. UC Davis not going to fight for second and third chances. They are well outside the top 275 with regards to defensive rebound percentage. But for UC Davis, unlike past years where they only had like one main scorer, it's a little bit more spread out this year with Connor Sevilla, Marcus Wilson, and Niles Cooper all give you between 12.3 and 13.6 points per contest. Now, Niko Rokac with 9.5 points, 5.5 rebounds per game. He's a lone guy that gives you 5+ boards per contest, but Sevilla does shoot 41% from 3. Davis overall does shoot 35.2% from 3-point range. That's a top 135 mark in the country. Now, UC Davis, while they generate a bunch of turnovers, they have their issues taking care of the ball themselves outside the top 275 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis on offense. Meanwhile, for Irvine, you've got Jurian Dixon, give you about 15.5 points per game, shoots 39.5% from 3. You've had Harrison Carrington be able to shoot about 36.5% from 3, 8.5 points per game. Kyle Evans is a dominator down low, 8.5 boards, 3.5 blocks per game. And for Irvine, as great as they are on the glass, they're pretty solid in terms of just being able to guard down low. They are giving up a lot of second and third chances. Part of this is because they're so good in terms of their block shot rate, so they're actually outside the top 250 in terms of defensive rebound percentage. And I do think that the 68.4% free throw shooting, along with them being outside the top 250 in terms of ball security, does enough to keep UC Davis lively. So set a total of 142. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Davis, and I do like the under as well. 7-13, 7-14. Air Force is on the road against Nevada, and Nevada does find themselves as 24.5 point favorites. So on this game, 142.5, and I'd set a line here of a 23.5. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Air Force. Had a spirited effort last week against Wyoming, and it's all bad for Air Force right now. They're outside the top 325 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They're a bottom 30 team with regards to rebound percentage. They're a bottom 10 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. They do have Lucas Hobin and Cam Sanders combining for about 24.6 points per game, and Sanders is out shooting 37% from three-point range. You got a little bit of something going there. It's been a brutal time for Air Force taking care of the ball. They're a bottom 5 team in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis. Nevada's not one of those teams that's going to put you under duress, though. They're outside the top 150 in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. Nevada's amazing at getting to the free throw line. Top 15 team in terms of free throw attempts on a per possession basis. Should be a relatively low tempo game. Air Force is 283rd in terms of total possessions per game. Nevada, they're hovering right around about 261st. And for Nevada, they go bounce away from three. They shoot 37.5% from the outside. Top 35 mark in the country. Corey Camper, 17 points. He shoots 42% from three. You've had Elijah Price dominate down low, 13 points, 8.5 rebounds. He's going to be able to run things down low, but he's pretty much the lone guy outside of Camper that gives you over 4 rebounds per game. Vaughn Weems does shoot 45% from three-point range, and for the Nevada team, does need to be noted that they are, in terms of their two-point shooting percentage, outside the top 330 in all of college basketball. So I do think that that's going to be a little bit of an issue, and that's going to be a help you out a tad with regards to this total. I did set my total here at a 145.5 because Air Force has just been getting absolutely blasted with regards to giving up points, but I think that Air Force just enough to hold with this in this number. I did set my total at a 145.5, so like the over, and with Air Force, 24 plus is my buy point there, made them the 23.5 point dog. 7:15, 7:16, Texas Tech is going to be on the road against BYU. BYU 1.5 to 2.5 point favorites. 159.5 is the total. Made Texas Tech the favorite. I am going to be willing to take them outright on the money line. For BYU, you'd think that the biggest concern for them without Richie Saunders would be the offense, but the defense has just absolutely hit the skids for them. They're now outside the top 115 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. You look ever since the Saunders injury, and pretty much all but one game, they've given up 75 plus points. They had that spirited effort against Iowa State, and past that just has not been great, coming off of giving up 90 to Cincinnati. You do have AJ DePaul has been solid, 25 points, 6.5 boards, 3.5 assists, shoots 35% for three. Robert Wright has been Mr. Right, shooting 42.5% for three, but I have to wonder if the offense is going to be falling off the map a little bit as well, because these are the lone two guys that give you over 7.7 points per game. You've got Kennard Davis, who gives you 7.5 points. He only shoots about 30% from three. You've had Gabikita do a solid job down low with about 7 rebounds per game, but you don't have a lot of guys that really pop it in there from three-point range. And for Texas Tech, even though they are without JT Toppin, they've been able to do a great job without him. They're shooting over 40% for three since he went down with injury. Do think that they're going to become a little bit more one-dimensional. I think the teams are going to be catching up a little bit with that regard, but still, you've been able to have Donovan Atwell along Christian Anderson in the backcourt, do a tremendous job, as Anderson is your main facilitator, 7.7 assists, 19 points. He shoots 42% for three. Atwell shoots 46% from three, and Luke Bogomboy has been able to come in there, give you nearly 2 blocks per contest. So even though he's not quite the offensive weapon that Toppin is down low, he's been able to do a solid job defensively. BYU very much going to be looking to push tempo here, while Texas Tech has been a relatively mid-tempo team all season long, but without Toppin, they've been playing at a pace more than 4 possessions per game slower. Meanwhile, for BYU, you take a look at them without Richie Saunders, they've been playing still at that fast pace. They're about 56th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, even though it is a very tough place to be able to travel to and win. I do think that Texas Tech actually is going to improve a little bit defensively here moving forward, and I do think that they get the job done here on the road against a BYU team that, at this point, I don't trust. I set my total at 159. Here at the 159.5. I like the under, and Texas Tech on the money line. 7:17, 7:18. Washington is going to be on the road facing off against Oregon. Oregon, a 1.5 point favorite in a lot of spots. It's game 140.5 to 141.5. I made Washington the favorite. I like them on the money line. I know that Washington has been dealing with a lot of injuries in their backcourt, but you know what? You've got the best player, in my opinion, in the game, as you've had Heinz Steinbeck be able to supply 18 points, 11 rebounds. Zoom Diallo gives you double figures. It's a Washington team that's been a top 100 team in terms of taking care of the ball. They don't put you under any sort of duress whatsoever. They're outside the top 290 in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, and they're about 118th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Oregon is far worse, so 235th in the country with this regard, and it's an Oregon team that's just not really excelling anywhere. They're outside the top 240 with their 2-point shooting percentage. With Jackson Shell set out of the fold, the backcourt has really suffered. They're only shooting about 32% from three. That's 285th in all of college basketball. You do have a guy, Nate Biddle, that's able to do a little bit of everything, 15 plus points, 6 boards. He has been able to pop a few threes, and Oregon is a top 85 team in terms of offense. offensive rebound percentage, but they're also outside the top 225 in terms of defensive rebound percentage. They're outside the top 150 in terms of opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. You've had DK Simpkins be able to supply the team with about 12.5 points per game. KJ Evans, 13 points, about 7.5 rebounds per game. But for Washington, even though things are a little bit disjointed, they've been dealing with the injury to Desmond Claude in the backcourt. You've been able to get back Wesley Yates, who's been able to give you double figures. If Washington needs to cover at the free throw line, they shoot 75.9%. That's a top 55 mark in the country with the way that this team protects the ball and the way that they've been able to do an okay job on the glass. I think that Washington finds a way to be able to get the job done. I did some online at 2.5, so I like them on the money line. Think that this is close enough for late foul, so my total 143.5. I like the over. 719, 720. Arizona is going to be on there against Colorado. Colorado is a 13.5 to a 14.5 point favorite. Throughout this game, 155.5 to 156.5, and I made Arizona the 13-point favorite. So I'm willing to take 13.5 plus here with Colorado. It's just hard to be able to make that travel for Colorado. They've been a up-tempo team that's not like ridiculously up-tempo, 98th in terms of total possessions per game. Arizona, without question, they're looking to gut it. They're 46th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and Arizona is just a really well-rounded team. They are 5th in the country currently in terms of points allowed on a per-possession basis, and while they might not be quite that dominant on offense, they're still a rock-solid team with this regard. In terms of points per possession, they're 16th. You've got Toby Awaka, Mateusz Krivas, who've been able to combine for about 18 or so rebounds per game. Jaden Bradley has been able to give you double figures. He's shooting darn near 40% from three. Koa Pete is a guy that's able to do a little bit of everything. 5+ boards, 2.5+ assists, throws in their 12 points per game. Anthony Del Rosso shoots darn near 40% from three, but Colorado has been a good 3-point shooting team. Top 100 team with this regard, as they've got Barrington Argris continue to shoot 50% from three with 14 points per game. Sebastian Reynick along with Bengo Doc. These two guys combined for about 23.5 points per game, and between the two of them, about 12 rebounds per game. Colorado's been able to do the little things well. Top 75 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. Top 75 with regards to their free throw shooting percentage. They're outside the top 150 with regards to rebound percentage, and they're just getting bombed from three. They allow opponents to shoot 37% from three. That's outside the top 325 in the country, but it is an Arizona team that's in the top 40 in terms of percentage of their shots that come from inside the 3-point line. So I think that that's going to help them out a little bit, and you do have a Colorado team that is much better with their offense when they're at home rather than away from home. As for Colorado, shoot 37.4% for three at home, 32.8% away from home. So I did set a total here of a 157. I'm willing to take 13.5 plus here with Colorado, and here at the 155.5, 156. Do like the over. This is the last game that I'll hit before we go to a break and then go to these conference tournament games. 721, 722. Long Beach State is going to be on the road against Hawaii. Hawaii is a 13.5 to a 14.5 point favorite, and your total, that is between 149.5 to 148.5, and with Hawaii, I did set them as a favorite of 12 points, so I am going to be willing to take the points. It's a Long Beach State team that has been a little bit up and down this season in terms of generating turnovers, but still not doing a bad job there, and Hawaii has had their ball security issues outside the top 315 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis. Now, it's a Long Beach State team that does not shoot the same way away from home rather than at home. 35.8% 3-point shooting percentage at home, 29.1%. Meanwhile, for Hawaii, they only shoot 30% from three-point range at home. That actually goes to 36% away from home. And it is a Long Beach State team that they very much gamble for turnovers. They are well outside the top 250 in terms of opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. As a matter of fact, in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, that goes down to 305th. It's a Hawaii team that has been able to do a really good job on the inside. Top 30 team with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. Top 50 team with regards to opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. One thing Long Beach State has been okay with, not allowing a lot of second and third chances. Top 90 team in terms of their defensive rebound percentage. Petrar Mastrovich has been a double-figure scorer for the team that has been able to lead the way down low. 6.5 boards, 14.5 points per game. Gavin Sykes throws in there 19 points, and he shoots about 37.5% from 3 points, but Long Beach State also is outside the top 200 with their own 2-point shooting percentage. Those turnover issues being outside the top 270 in terms of ball control. I think that that's going to be a little bit of an issue, and for Hawaii, this is a team that's looking to bump up tempo, and same with Long Beach State. Long Beach State 52nd in terms of total possessions per game. Hawaii is 25th, but still, with all the sloppiness, I did have to set my total here more around to 146. I'm in on the under, especially with this Hawaii team just doing as great of a job defensively as they are. You've got a 7-footer in Isaac Johnson who's give you 13.5 points, 5.5 boards, and he shoots about 34% from three. Harry Ruideff, he's their main 3-point shooter at about 40%, 10.5 points per game. And for Hawaii, they really excel in terms of getting to the free throw line at home. Top 15 team in terms of free throw attempts on a per possession basis. And they've been a top 100 team with their own 2-point shooting percentage, just not giving you a lot from the outside. And again, the 13.5 turnovers per game, I think are going to be costly. It is a Long Beach State team that will put you on the free throw line, by the way. Top 30 team in terms of free throw attempts allowed on a per possession basis, but do think that with the sloppiness, you get an under, and Long Beach State holding in there. So set my line at 12. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Long Beach State, and I do like the under. And coming up next, how about if we start on this conference tournament games right here on Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Peterson, now a part of the Beast and Family Podcast. Side edge this college basketball season? Well, VSiN experts use CBB Analytics, the most comprehensive college basketball analytics platform in the world. See injury impact, on and off data, clutch time performance metrics, first versus second half splits, and so much more. Utilize the promo code of VSiN, that is VSIN, to get $30 off and find your betting edge over at cbbanalytics.com. That is cbbanalytics, all one word.com. For anyone that is new to VSiN, well, I wish you a friendly hello. This is an attention to anyone that is new to VSiN because you're able to get some free stuff with our daily newsletter. It's a great way to catch up on everything that's happening in the sports betting world. It's delivered straight to your inbox every single morning. VSiN's newsletter offers picks, data, strategies for the day's betting menu, and so much more. Sign up for free today over at VSiN.com/newsletter. That's VSIN.com/newsletter, and start receiving your free newsletter tomorrow morning. That is VSIN.com/newsletter. Stay ahead of the game and bet smarter with VSiN. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hoops Peters, and now part of the VSiN Family Podcast. We got through the non-conference tournament games. Now let's dive back into the tournament games. These are on the biggest Las Vegas board, and that starts right about now.
Most financial establishments close at a certain time, but not here. It is time for a side and total on every game on today's betting board bank shots.
723, 724. You've got Campbell and Stony Brook. They are doing battle out there in the CAA tournament in Washington, D.C. Campbell, a 2.5 to a 3-point favorite, and total on this game, 146.5 to 147.5, and I said Stony Brook is a 4.5 point favorite. I like them on the money line. This Campbell team, in my opinion, has just been overvalued all season long. With Campbell, they have been outside the top 185 in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. They're looking to play fast, but not necessarily warp speed fast. 130th in terms of total possessions per game. Stony Brook 242nd in terms of total possessions per game. It is a Stony Brook team that allow for some second and third chances. 232nd with regards to defense rebound percentage. And Campbell, a top 125 team in terms of offensive rebound percentage. It is a Campbell team, though, that is going to be looking to try to execute on the inside as their three-point shooting has not been great. As right now, Campbell, they are 253rd in the country with regards to their two-point shooting percentage from three-point range. It's a Campbell group that, away from home, they only shoot 29.8% from three-point. Stony Brook is outside the top 3 with their own two-point shooting percentage, so I did have to set a total here of a 146.5. I do like the under, and for Stony Brook, their three-point shooting away from home does go down to 32.7%, but I actually think that they've got the best player in this game, and that would be Eric Pratt. He can really shoot you in or out of a game, but 19 points, 5 boards, 3.5 assists. He's been able to give you about 32% three-point shooting. You've got Richard Goods give you the goods with about 35% three-point shooting, 8 points, 6 rebounds per game. It's a Stony Brook team that has been able to do an okay job in terms of generating turnovers. Top 175 team with this regard. And for Campbell, they've been better in terms of taking care of the ball here in CAA play, but still a team that's been outside the top 225 with regards to their own ball security. Pretty good in terms of getting to the free throw line. Top 75 team in terms of free throw attempts on a per possession basis, but just not really doing a great job in terms of executing inside. And this is a Campbell group that they're looking to drive you inside, but they're outside the top 250 in terms of opponents' two-point shooting percentage, outside the top 300 with their own three-point shooting percentage. DJ Turner of Smith, 19 points, shoots about 33.5% from three. Jeremiah Johnson has come on strong. He gives you about 15 points per contest. Davideus Butka along Chris Fields. These two guys combine for about 14.5 rebounds per game, but with just all the little things that Campbell is not doing, I do think that it allows Stony Brook to get the job done. I said Stony Brook is 4.5 point favorite. I like them on the money line. Maybe my total 146.5, so here at 147 plus, I do like the under. 725, 726, you've got Northeastern and Drexel doing battle. Right now, Drexel is a 3.5 to a 4 point favorite. 139.5 to 141.5 is the total. Semi total 140. I'm looking at that 141.5 to the under now. This Northeastern team is outside the top 320 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They're relatively up tempo, 129th in terms of total possessions per game. Meanwhile, Drexel is just 337th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Drexel's actually been a halfway decent three-point shooting team. They shoot 35% from three-point, only falls off to 34.4% away from home. It's a Northeastern group that they've been shooting about 34% from three-point away from home. Now, if you've got a trepidation with Drexel, they are shooting less than 66% at the free throw line. That is a bottom 30 mark in all of college basketball, but I mean, this is a Northeastern team that is a bottom 15 team in terms of opponents' two-point shooting percentage. Drexel has been really good on the inside. They're a top 40 team in terms of opponents' two-point shooting percentage. percentage, and Drexel really only has one main double-figure scorer. You've been able to get about 14.5 points, 5 rebounds out of Shane Blakeney. Past that, it's a whole is greater than some of its parts with the likes of Victor Panoff, Eli Beard, Kayvon Vandernoorst, all give you between 8.6 and 9.5 points per contest, and really nobody other than Garfield Turner gives you more than 5 rebounds per game, but they do a great job as a collective on the glass. Meanwhile, Northeastern has just dealt with injuries all throughout the season. L.A. Pratt was supposed to be a top scorer for the team. He's out. Xavier Bray has been able to step up with about 12.5 points, 2.5 rebounds per game, and William Kamori, 13 points per game, shoots 40% from three-point. He's been a little bit up and down here over the last few weeks as well, as he's dealt with some injury, most likely going to be out of the fold in this game too. So I look at this Northeastern team being banged up, and congratulations to them being able to get past on Thursday, but I do think that Drexel should be the favorite and gets the job done. I'm willing to take the under, and with Drexel, I made them the 5-point favorite. We'll want to lay the number 727, 728. Hampton and Towson do battle from our nation's capital, as you've got Towson a 6.5 to a 6-point favorite. Totals between 129.5 to 131.5. I do like Towson in this spot. I set them as a 7.5-point favorite. Both of these teams play slow, and both of these teams have really not excelled on offense. Hampton is 270th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Towson is 358th, and with this Towson group, they're still a rock-solid defense. 71st in the country in terms of points allowed on a per-possession basis. Hampton's 149th. Hampton has been pretty solid in terms of grabbing second and third chances, but Towson has been even better with this regard in terms of percentage of missed shots that result in an offensive rebound. You've got this Towson group currently 29th in all of college basketball. Away from home, they grab nearly 35% of their misses as an offensive rebound. Now, they're awful with their three-point shooting. Towson is a bottom 10 team with that regard, but Hampton, they're right now shooting about 29.7% from three. They're a bottom 15 mark. You've got Michael Ealy, who's come off of injury, give you about 12.5 points per game, and then Jaquel Gaines-Wyatt, 11.5 points per contest. Xavier Long, like his game, 9.9 points, 9.6 rebounds per game, so these guys have been able to do a pretty rock-solid job there, but other than Long, you really don't have anyone else that gives you over 5 rebounds per game. It's a Hampton team that has also been outside the top 300 with their own 2-point shooting percentage, and it's not like Towson, even though they're built down low, it's not like they're doing a great job on the inside as well. They're right around about 300th with their own 2-point shooting percentage, so I think that you're in for a big-time slog of a game. I did set my total as a result at a 126.5. I'm going to be in on the under. With Towson, you do have to have trepidation if they need to hit free throws to cover this number. They shoot 68.6% at the free throw line. Tyler Teata, best scorer in this game, 16.5 points, shoots 86% at the free throw line. And then Dylan Williamson does give you 14.5 points, 3.5 assists per game, and he shoots 34% from three. In fact, Tyler Coleman now shoots 38% from three, like the lone guy on the roster that shoots about 34% from the outside. And Towson not going to put you under duress outside the top 290 in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. I think that you just get a slow bleeder of a game, and with both of these teams having their issues, I do think that Towson, they do find a way to be able to get the job done, mainly because Hampton, they're just not doing a great job on the inside or the outside. I think that Towson wins from within. Set Towson as a 7.5-point favorite, so I'm going to be willing to lay up to 7 with them, and like the under, so I told 126.5, 729, 730, it's Elon. They're going to be on the road against William and Mary. Well, it's from our nation's capital out there in Washington, D.C., and Elon is a 4.5-point underdog / a 5-point dog. Total on this game, 164.5, and with Elon, I did have to make them the underdog of 6 points here. I'm going to be willing to lay with William and Mary. It's just an Elon team that's been absolutely ghastly in terms of their defense. They're neither fast or slow, 176th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. You've got a William and Mary team that has been bumping up the tempo, 15th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. William and Mary not going to give themselves second and third chances, 323rd in the country in terms of percentage of missed shots that become an offensive rebound. You expected a little bit more for them from three as well. They're about 227th. They shoot 33.1% from the outside. Elon, they've been shooting about 34.2% from three-point. Elon is actually giving up fewer points per possession away from home rather than at home, but I do think that this is going to be a cranked up game, and I do like the over in this spot, especially with an Elon team that's been solid in terms of taking care of the ball away from home. They're a top 85 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. Chandler Cottrell has been able to be that main scorer with about 20 points per game, and then around him you've got some relatively solid 3-point shooters, as you've had Randall Pettis, Bryson Cockley be able to combine for 23.5 points per game between the two of them. They've been able to shoot about 37% from three. Kepper Klonzich has been rock solid as well, but he's been dealing with injury, so that's hurt them. Joshua Carr has stepped up with about 7.5 points, 4.5 rebounds per game, and on the flip side for William and Mary, it's very much a whole greater than the sum of its parts approach. Right now, your main scorer averages 12.3 points per game, and Reese Miller as a part of a group in which you've got essentially 8 different guys between 6.8 and 12.3 points per game. You've got a lot of guys that give you between about 2 to 3 assists per game. Your main guy, Chase Lowe, 6 rebounds, 3.5 assists, 9.5 points per game for William and Mary, they've been able to do a really good job of executing on the inside. They're a top 25 team with regards to their 2-point shooting percentage. They also allow opponents to shoot only about 32.5% from 3-points as well. It's an Elon team that's getting destroyed down low. They're outside the top 285 with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, and I do think that for William & Mary, they find a way to get the job done from the inside. So I did set my total 166. I like the over, and I'm willing to lay up to 5.5 here with our nation's favorite tag team of William and Mary, 731, 732. The Citadel is going to be partaking in the SoCon tournament out there at the Cherokee Center in Asheville, North Carolina against East Tennessee. The opener is East Tennessee being a 14.5 point favorite. Total on this game, 138.5. I set my line at 15.5, so I'm willing to lay up to 15. I have a Citadel team that is quite slow with regards to their tempo, 314th in terms of total possessions per game. East Tennessee, a little bit faster, but not a ton, 281st in terms of total possessions per game. And it's an ETSU team that's doing a solid job offensively in terms of just being able to execute. 71st in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. They're a top 100 team in terms of points per possession. And the Citadel, they've been able to take a little bit of better care of the ball. They're about 171st in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, but this is a Citadel team that's right now outside the top 335 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They had a massive explosion against Chattanooga yesterday, but going into that game, about 306th in the country in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Now, I do like what Solo Abasi brings to the table, 8 points, about 6 rebounds per game, but on the flip side for East Tennessee State, even though they're not the same team in terms of grabbing second and third chances for themselves, they've been a top 45 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage with having Cam Morris, Blake Barkley combined for about 11 rebounds per game between the two of them. You get 28.3 points per game. Barkley is able to shoot 36% for 3. Brian Taylor shoots 35% for 3. He supplies you with about 14 points per game. And then Alan Strothers, even though he only gives you about 4 points per game, very integral to this team. He gives you a little bit of a steal, 3 assists per game for a East Tennessee team that has been a top 85 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, top 100 team with regards to opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, and in a pressure spot, they shoot 76% at the free throw line. And with the Citadel, you've got a few guys in the backcourt that have been able to contribute as you're getting right around about 14.5 points per game out of Braxton Williams. Christian Moore does give you more with 11.5 points per game, and Moore does shoot 39% from 3-point, but offense as a whole just has not been able to execute very well. They're getting plowed on the glass, and the Citadel team is allowing teams to shoot 36% from 3, and they're outside the top 320 with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. So I'm in on the under with ETSU's defense up by total 137.5, and want to lay up to 15 here with East Tennessee. 733, 734. You've got UNC Greensboro playing against Wofford, and Wofford is on my line a 6.5 point favorite. We're not seeing any openers, but I've got my handicap. Want to lay up to 6 with Wofford, 7 or more taking the points with Greensboro. Made a total of 152.5, 152 or less, and on the over 153 or higher the under. Have a Greensboro team that's been mid-tempo, 153rd in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Meanwhile, with Wofford, this is a team that's neither here nor there with their tempo, 198th in terms of total possessions per game. Both of these teams have had a rough go of it on defense, but Wofford very much excelling on offense in games played away from home. Top 50 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. They were dealing with an injury to their top scorer in Kamari Holmes. He's been able to come back. He gives you 17 points, 5.5 boards, 2.5 assists. Right now shooting 34.9% for 3. Niles Malchowski continues to shoot 38% for 3 with 17 points per contest. Chase Watley is able to step up in a big way as he's been able to give you about 9.5 points per contest. And then on the other end of things, you've been able to have UNC Greensboro just be a much better 3-point shooting team than they were towards the beginning part of the season. In conference play, they've been able to shoot 38.3% from 3-point. Now, it's a defense that's ghastly. They're outside the top 335 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. They are generating no turnovers whatsoever. Wofford is not either, so clean possessions to be had here. Justin Neely, he's best low post presence in this game. 17.5 points, 11.5 rebounds per game. William Marvel continues to shoot 52.5% from 3. And Noah Nuggard, he's been able to give you 7.5 points. He shoots 38% from 3, so you've had a few guys be able to step up for this Greensboro team, but with this Greensboro bunch, they don't give themselves second and third chances. They're outside the top 250 in terms of defensive rebound percentage. Pretty solid in terms of getting to the free throw line. They've been a top 50 team in terms of free throw attempts on a per possession basis, and this is a Wofford team that is giving up good looks from 3. They're outside the top 300 in terms of opponent's 3-point shooting percentage, so 152 or less and on the over, 153 or higher the under. With Wofford, I'm going to be willing to lay up to 6 with them, 7 or more. I'm taking those points. With Greensboro, 735, 736, you've got Furman, and they're going to be playing against Samford, and Samford just find themselves here as a favorite of 1.5 to 2 points, 146.5 is the total line. I did set my total at a 146.5. I'm right now seeing a stray 146 out there. 146 or less, I like the over. If this goes past 147 or higher, that does become my buy point on the under. So you've got a Furman team that is a top 135 team in terms of points per possession, but where they really excel is on the inside. They're a top 5 team with regards to their 2-point shooting percentage. Just have had a little bit of a tough time taking care of the ball. They're outside the top 275 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, but Alex Wilkins in the backcourt has been able to step up as a freshman, 5 assists, just under a steal, 17 points points per game. Doesn't really bomb it from three, but Asa Thomas, who was missing for a little bit of time in conference play, he's back shooting 39.5% from three, 13 points per game. You've had Charles Johnson be able to supply the team with about 9 rebounds per game. Tom House has been a little bit of a mixer and shaker, 7.5 points, pair of assists per game, and then on the flip side, you have a Samford team that I think that they're just efficient enough to be able to get the job done here, set them as a 2.5 point favorite, because with Samford, they do a nice job in terms of valuing the ball. Top 15 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. Also top 75 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage. They're not allowing second and third chances. For Samford, they've been pretty strong on the inside. Top 125 team with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. Getting bombed from three, they're outside the top 275 with regards to opponents' 3-point shooting percentage, but Samford has really been able to take off with their 3-point shooting. They've been top in the SoCon with their 3-point shooting percentage, with Jaden Booth leading the way, 21 points, 87% free throw shooters, 43% for three. Now, that is a trepidation with this team. They do shoot, Samford does 68.8% at the free throw line. Furman, though, they shoot 67.4%. They're even worse with that regard. Samford also has the Norris brothers and Keaton and Cade Norris. These guys combine for about 18.9 points per game. With Keaton, he gives you 5 assists per contest. Cade shoots 39% from three-point. Not a ton of rebounding for the team outside of Dylan Faulkner, but he should be able to control things down low with about 8.5 boards, 17 points per game. And in the end, I do think that Samford finds a way to get the job done. 146 or less in on the over, and with Samford, I'm willing to lay up to 2 with them. 7:30. You got Western Carolina playing against Mercer, and Mercer does find themselves as a favorite here of anywhere between 2 to 2.5 points. I'm actually seeing a 1.5 now as well. Total house game 155.5 to 156.5, and when it comes to this Western Carolina team, I did set them as an underdog of 6 points, so I'm going to be willing to take Mercer. Mercer has been a team that's really been able to excel on offense, top 75 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis, and with West Carolina, they have been an up-tempo team this season, 138th in terms of total possessions per game, but really slowed down in SoCon play. That's right on par with Mercer, 139th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and for West Carolina, they're just not doing the little things great. They've been great on the glass, top 75 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage, top 100 team in terms of offensive rebound percentage, and Mercer is outside the top 250 with regards to the defensive rebound percentage, so Western Carolina should be able to get second and third chances, but Western Carolina also averaging 16.8 points fewer per 100 possessions when they're away from home rather than at home. For Western Carolina, you do have a few guys that have been able to do a nice job on offense for this team, and Cord Stansbury along with Marcus Kell combined for about 27.5 points per game, with neither of these guys shooting above 31% per three, though. That means that you need to have Talon Petaway along Julian Swarmo be able to step up. Both of these guys shoot 40% per three between the two of them, about 20 points per contest, and then you've been able to have Samuel Dada give you 7.5 rebounds per game, and then Abdul Fantakaba, he gives you about 5 points, 6 rebounds per game. On the flip side for Mercer, you're going to have the best point guard in this game as Baraka Okoji, who comes over from George Mason, 19.5 points, 5.5 assists per contest. Shoots only about 32% from three. Armani Mighty has been able to give you 13.5 points, 10.5 boards, block and half per contest, and then Brody Shoulders has been able to supply about 9.5 points, 7 rebounds. He shoots in the mid-30s from three-point. It's a Mercer team that has been able to do a nice job in terms of getting to the free throw line. They shoot 72.5% at the free throw line, and they should be able to take you to a Western Carolina team that's outside the top 340 in terms of opponent's 3-point shooting percentage. So set my line at 6. I do like Mercer here laying the number in. Set my total 154 with Western Carolina still being sloppy with the ball. So in on the under 739, 740, you've got to rake, and they are going to be playing against Illinois Chicago. This is from the lovely city of St. Louis, and right now with the Drake, they're a 5.5 point underdog. Total this game is 144.5, and I do like the under. I set my total 137.5. I have a Drake defense that overall for the season, they're right around about 280th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but in games played away from home, that goes into the top 225, and in games played away from home, Drake has been a top 150 team with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. Drake just went absolutely bombs away from Belmont yesterday, but prior to that, they had been shooting 32.5% from 3-point in a road/core venue. Illinois Chicago is looking to pile drive the ball down low as well. They're shooting just 32% from three overall for the season, 281st in the country. Neither of these teams are really up tempo either. Illinois Chicago entered into Friday 220th in terms of total possessions per game. Drake 223rd. To the credit of Drake, they do a nice job taking care of the ball. In terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, this is a group that is in the top 85 in the country, and you've got a nice go-to scorer in Jalen Quinn. Quinn has been able to give this team 19.5 points, 4 boards, 3 assists, shoots 36% from three. You've had Eli Sheltar be able to step up in a big way. He gives you about 9 points per contest, but down the stretch has become a double-figure scorer. Right now, he's shooting about 40% for three. Oku Frederico gives you about 5 boards per contest, but for Illinois Chicago, even though they have been giving up a lot of second and third chances, they're outside the top 275 in terms of defensive rebound percentage. They're also a top 30 team in terms of percentage of their best shots that get rebounded on the offensive glass, as you got Elijah Crawford, Ahmad Henderson in the backcourt combining for about 25.5 points per game. You've got neither guy shooting above 30% from three-point, but both combined to shoot over 82% at the free throw line. That's big in a pressure spot. You've got Abdul Momoa down low, give you a block and a half, only about 4 boards per contest, but Mekhi Lowry throws in their 5.5 boards, 8 points per game. It's a Illinois Chicago team that has been doing an okay job down low, top 185 team with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. With Illinois Chicago, they've been pretty supreme in terms of generating turnovers, in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. They're a top 40 team in all of college basketball, and I do think that that's going to be able to win out here. I did set my line at 5.5, so I'm going to be looking for a little bit of movement. A lot of the initial openers were 5.5. I'm seeing a 6 out there, 6+. That is my buy point on Drake. I do like the under. I set my total at a 137.5. Another game without numbers, we head back to St. Louis, 741, 742. Bradley and Northern Iowa do battle. I set Bradley as a 2.5-point underdog, willing to lay up to 2, with Northern Iowa 3 or more. Taking the points with Bradley, 126.5 is my total, so 126 or less, and on the over, 127 or higher, the under. I have a Northern Iowa team that is playing just so slowly right now. In terms of total possessions per game, this team checks in 341st in the country. Bradley, much more of a mid-tempo team. Right now, they're about 155th in terms of total possessions per game, but both of these teams are looking to be able to excel defensively. Bradley has been a top 110 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Northern Iowa is 10th. They do a great job in terms of being able to guard the three-point line. Obviously, three-point shooting fades into the abyss a little bit here in this venue, and for Bradley, this has been a team that has been pretty reliant upon their three-point shooting. Going into yesterday, shooting right around about 35.9% for three. That's the top 85 mark in the country. They are not executing down low. They're outside the top 280 with their two-point shooting percentage. Now, Bradley does a great job taking care of the ball. They're a top 40 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis on offense, and defensively, top 50 team in terms of generating turnovers, but it's also a group that doesn't grab a lot of second and third chances. In Northern Iowa, top 40 team in terms of their defensive rebound percentage. You've got Jawan Johnson, who's been able to give you 17.5 points, 2.5 steals, shoots 40% for three. Alex Xavier shoots 43% for three, 12.5 points per contest. And then Ahmet Janovich is a true 7-footer that's able to give you 5.5 boards per contest, but I mean, he's right now your top rebounder. Meanwhile, for Northern Iowa, it's very much a whole is greater than some of its parts sort of collective for them as well, especially on the glass, as you do have two guys in the backcourt that have been your main scorers. Leon Bond, 11.5 points, 5 boards, and he's been able to shoot 36% from three. Trey Campbell, he's up to 13.5 points, 4 assists per contest. Max Weisbrod has been able to give you a little bit of facilitation with about 2 assists, 6.5 points per game. He shoots 38% from three. Now, Northern Iowa, if you do have a little bit of trepidation with them, they do shoot just 70% of the free throw line, and that is outside the top 280 in all of college basketball. Bradley, neither here nor there. They shoot about 73% at the free throw line, but with how reliant Bradley is on their three-point shooting, now I will say Bradley was also outside the top 290 in terms of their three-point shooting percentage coming into this tournament, and as we know, this is not a tournament that necessarily treats three-point shooting very politely. I do think that it's going to be a very, shall we say, low-scoring game, 126 or less, and on the over, 127 or higher, the under, and I'm going to be willing to lay up to 2 here with Northern Iowa, 3 or more. I'm going to be willing to take those points in this ordeal with Bradley. 743, 744, we head out to the Metro Atlantic tournament. This is Marist, and they're going to be playing up against Quinnipiac. Quinnipiac opened up as the 1 to 1.5 point underdog. Now they're the 1.5 to 2 point favorite. Totals between 130 to 130.5. I did set a total of a 134. I do like the over, even though Marist has been a really good defensive team. They're right now a top 12 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, but for Marist, they do have some big home and road splits. They are giving up right around about 12.7 points more per 100 possessions away from home rather than at home, and you've got a Quinnipiac team that has been able to do a pretty solid job with their defense away from home. In a road/neutral venue, it's a Quinnipiac team that does find themselves in the top 60 with regards to points allowed on a per possession basis, and for Quinnipiac, they've shot it really well from three-point range away from home, 34.9%. That's a top 100 mark in the country, and for Marist, they do a nice job at the free throw line. They are a top 10 team with their free throw shooting percentage. They shoot just 31.6% from three-point range, and Quinnipiac does a nice job in terms of giving themselves second and third chances. Top 60 team in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound. Really like what Amari Monroe brings to the table, 15.5 points, 8 rebounds, and then Jaden Zimmerman has been able to give you 15.5 points per contest. Asim Jones continues to shoot 48% from three-point. I don't know if that's going to be long-lasting, and do have to have trepidation with Quinnipiac at the free throw line. They do shoot just 68.7% at the charity stripe, and they've been excellently executed down low. Quinnipiac has been outside the top 3 with their own two-point shooting percentage. Top 55 team with regards to opponents' two-point shooting percentage, with Marist being a little bit, shall we say, shaky with their three-point shooting. They are very much looking to pile drive the ball down low. Marist has been themselves outside the top 225 with their own two-point shooting percentage, but for Marist, you've been able to have Mr. Justin Menard be able to save you if you've been taking their point spreads, because they've been able to cover quite a few of them, with giving you 12.5 points, shoots 36% per three. Rashawn Blackwell, Elisha Lewis both give you 12 points per game, with Blackwell shooting about 34% for three and 93% of the free throw line. And for this Mariners team, out of their top 5 scorers, all but one of them have been able to shoot at least 82.5% of the free throw line, so that's a big edge for them. And it's a Quinnipiac team that, with regards to their fouls committed on a per possession basis, this is a team that has been pretty solid, being a top 125 team in terms of not allowing free throws. So I think that that's going to be able to help them out in this ordeal. It's a Mariners team that has been a top 100 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, but you do now have a Quinnipiac team that has been in the top 135 in terms of ball security. I think that this is going to be close enough for late fellas, and I do think that Quinnipiac gets the job done. I did make Quinnipiac the favorite here, so I'm going to be willing to lay the small number, made them a 4-point favorite, and with this total, I made mine a 134, so I like the over. 745, 746, Mount St. Mary's. They're going to be playing against Siena, and Siena does find themselves as a mid-tier favorite here, as you're going to be laying with them 3.5 points. So on this game, it is 131.5, and with Siena, I did set them as a 6.5 point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay it with Mount St. Mary's. I just can't trust this team because they're just so bad in terms of taking care of the ball. Outside the top 360 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis on offense. On defense, they're outside the top 275 in terms of generating turnovers, and Siena in a road/inch-court venue is a top 45 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. Now, Mount St. Mary's has given themselves second and third chances, top 70 team in terms of offensive rebound percentage in games played away from home. But for Mount St. Mary's, it's just a big giant hodgepodge for the team because they're also just not executing well on offense. They're outside the top 275 in terms of points per possession. When they go to the free throw line, they shoot at 66.8% the free throw line. They shoot 32.5% for three, outside the top 250 there. Now, Orlandis, Keys, Luke McKeldin, these guys combined for about 23.7 points per game, and Keys has been able to shoot about 35% from 3 points. Xavier Lipscomb is that do-it-all guy, 9.5 points, 4.5 boards, 4 assists, and shoots 35.5% from three. Dre DeVue has been able to throw in there about 11 points per game as well. But I mean, it is a bunch that you just don't necessarily have a lot of pizzazz out there in the backcourt. And for Siena, they have been outside the top 300 with their 3-point shooting percentage. And to the credit of Mount St. Mary's, they're pretty solid down low. They've been a top 100 team, actually a top 50 team with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. But in conference play for Siena, their 3-point shooting percentage did get up to 32.7%. It's a Siena group that is a top 125 team with regards to overall rebound percentage, with Gavin Doty, 17.5 points. He throws in there about 33% 3-point shooting, 7 boards, steal and apper contest. Siena, if they get sent to the free throw line, they do shoot 76.2% of the free throw line as well. That's rock solid. Just as shows as they will give you 4.5 assists, 13 points per game. For Siena, they do a nice job valuing the ball, top 100 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, and with Siena in games played away from them inside the top 125 in terms of both opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. I do think that they get the job done. I think that those late fouls do just enough to be able to get you over, even with Siena being outside the top 340 in terms of total possessions per game. So, semi-line at 6.5, I'm willing to lay with Siena, and I do like the 132 or less to the over. 747, 748. Appalachian State and Southern Miss to battle in the Sun Belt tournament. Right now, no numbers up on this game, but I set my handicap as I did set Southern Miss as a underdog of 3.5 points. Willing to lay up to 3 with App State. 4 more to get the points with Southern Miss. 133 or less in on the over. 134 or higher the under. And for Southern Miss, it's a team that plays with some tempo. 124th in terms of total possessions per game entering into yesterday. Appalachian State is at 353rd in terms of total possessions per game. Now, Appalachian State, a top 125 team in terms of offensive rebound percentage. Southern Miss right there at about 118th. But Appalachian State is the far stronger team down low, and they're the much better, shall we say, interior defense. As for Appalachian State, they're not a team that's going to put you under duress. They're outside the top 300 in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, but they don't give up clean looks, as App State 28th in the country in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, top 75 in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. Southern Miss, meanwhile, more around about 138th with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. That's big because it's an Appalachian State team that has been outside the top 250 with their 3-point shooting percentage, and Southern Miss even worse. They entered into yesterday 348th with their 3-point shooting percentage. Now, you've got back Isaac Tavares. That's big for this unit, as he's been able to do a nice job giving you about 15 points, 7 boards. He was missing for about the entirety of conference play. Talik Weeks has been that main man, 19 points, 5.5 boards, 2.5 assists per contest, and then you've got Tajai Benoit, who's able to throw in there 8 rebounds per game. Meanwhile, for Appalachian State, you do have a pair of guys in the backcourt that I really like. It's Kassan Jennings, who comes over from South Florida. He's been able to be the main guy, 15 points, 4.5 boards, 2.5 assists per game. Alonzo Dodd, the Doddfather, he throws in there about 4 assists per contest for an App State team that does a nice job protecting the ball. They're a top 75 team, actually a top 60 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. Again, they're outside the top 300 with their own 3-point shooting percentage, but top 100 team with their own 2-point shooting percentage. Now, the reason why I can't make Appalachian State any bigger of a favorite, they shoot 63.6% the free throw line. That is 365th out of 365 Division I teams. Not like Southern Miss's gangbusters at the free throw line at 73.5%, but country average is much better than being dead last in all of college basketball. But even with that bad free throw shooting percentage, I do think that Appalachian State does find a way to be able to persevere here because I just think that their interior play is just that good. So willing to lay up to 3 with Appalachian State, 4 more. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Southern Miss. And then with regards to the total, I made mine to wear a 133 or less and on the over, 134 or higher, the under. And then we've got 749, 750. This is Georgia Southern, and they're going to be taking on Coastal Carolina. We've got no numbers up on this game, but I've got my handicap as I did set Georgia Southern here as the 3.5 point underdog, so I'm willing to lay up to 3 with Coastal Carolina, 4 or more, taking the points with Georgia Southern, and then 149 or less in on the over, 150 or higher, the under. Have a Georgia Southern team that's looking to play at warp speed. They're a top 25 team in terms of total possessions per game, but keep in mind, third game in 3 days, that takes a lot out of you. It's a Georgia Southern team that's either here nor there with their 3-point shooting percentage. They are shooting about 33.3% from 3, and you've got a Coastal Carolina team that's not going to put you under any sort of duress whatsoever. They're a bottom 10 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, but one of the fortes of Georgia Southern is their ball security. This team is a top 40 team in the country in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, and for Coastal Carolina, they do a good job in terms of keeping things clean as well. And games played away from home, they're a top 45 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, and with this Georgia Southern team being one that is pretty content to be able to pile drive the ball down low, it's a Georgia Southern team that has been a top 225 team with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. It makes it all the bigger that Coastal Carolina is a top 40 team with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. Now, Tyron Morris, Bud Webb, they both give you about 15.5 points per game for Georgia Southern, and Morris being able to shoot 39% from 3-point range, and then you've got Nikavian White, who's been a little bit of a versatile do-it-all guy, 9.5 points, 3 rebounds per game. But that said, with this Georgia Southern team, they do have some kryptonites. They're outside the top 200 with regards to opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. They're good in terms of generating turnovers, top 75 unit in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, but again, Coastal Carolina, they're making the most out of their possessions. Coastal Carolina, a relative mid-tempo team. They're about 147th in terms of total possessions per game, and for Coastal Carolina, they're not shooting well on the inside whatsoever. They're outside the top 3 with regards to their own 2-point shooting percentage, but they have been a top 125 team in terms of overall rebound percentage. Georgia Southern outside the top 285 in terms of defensive rebound percentage, and for Coastal Carolina, you've got a big 3 for this team. Rashid Jones, he's been able to shoot 37% for 3 with 15 points, 4.5 boards, 3 assists per game. AJ Dantzler, 16 points on 39%, 3-point shooting to go with 5.5 rebounds per game, and then Joshua Beadle, 15.5 points, 4 boards, 3 assists, really doesn't pop it from 3, and then you got Reggie Hill thrown in there about 6 boards, 6.5 points per game. I do think that with Coastal Carolina shooting about 73% of the free throw line, they should be able to find a way to be able to close this game out. If Georgia Southern needs to sink free throws, they do shoot about 74%, and they've been able to get to the free throw line constantly. They also put you on the free throw line a lot as well, but I do think that the fresh legs prevail here. Willing to lay up to 3 with Coastal Carolina, 4 or more, taking the points with Georgia Southern, 149 or less, in on the over, 150 or higher, the under, 751, 752 on the card. This is the Summit League tournament, and Northern Arizona, they take on Idaho State. Idaho State is a 4.5 point favorite. 141 to 142 is the total, and I did make a total of a 144. I like the over. Now, for neither of these teams, they're playing up tempo. For Northern Arizona, they're 343rd in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Idaho State is a little bit more up tempo at 298th, but these are just 2 really ghastly defenses, and it's an Idaho State team that has been relatively solid with their 3-point shooting percentage at 33.6%. Now, Northern Arizona, all of a sudden, they've been a team that ranks 56th in the country. They shoot 36.3% from 3-point range away from home, but Idaho State has actually been a little bit better with their defense away from home rather than at home. Again, both of these teams are awful on defense. Northern Arizona, 355th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Meanwhile, for Idaho State, they're 340th, but Idaho State is allowing about 3.5 points fewer per 100 possessions away from home rather than at home. For Northern Arizona, they're just getting absolutely blasted on the glass. They're outside the top 3 in terms of defensive rebound percentage. They had Zach Davidson, really their main guy, down low, 14 points, 5 rebounds, go down with an injury. So Ryan Abelman, he has been able, man, to be able to give you 10.5 points, 5 boards, shoots 37% from 3, and then you do have Xavier Johnson give you about 5 boards and 7 points per game, but past that, there's just not a lot down low. You've been looking to Carl Marcus Poom to be able to give you 9 points, about 3 rebounds per contest, and on the flip side for Idaho State, I like what you've been able to get out of a pair of guys in Caleb Vandergreen along Connor Hollenbeck with about a combined 25 points per game. They've got good versatility, and then the guys around him shoot it well from 3. Martin Keel has been able to shoot 36% from 3, 9 points per contest. Jameson Guerra, 9.5 points per contest. He shoots 42% from 3. It's an Idaho State team that is shooting about 75% at the free throw line. They do give up quite a few free throws themselves, and they've been weak down low. They're outside the top 3 with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. They're a top 125 team with their own 2-point shooting percentage. Neither of these teams generate a lot of turnovers. Idaho State outside the top 275 in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. Northern Arizona, they're outside the top 150 themselves, and Northern Arizona just does not come up with second and third chances. They're outside the top 325 35 in terms of offensive rebound percentage, but in a pressure spot, Northern Arizona shooting just 68% of the free throw line. They could be a little bit costly, and this is a game that is being played out there in the great state of Idaho. So circumstance where I just set Idaho State here as a favorite of 6 points, willing to lay the 4.5 and like the over. Semi-total at a 144. 753, 754. Sacramento State is going to be playing against Idaho. Idaho is a favorite here of 6 to 6.5 points. Your total is anywhere between 158.5 to 159.5. And with Sacramento State, I did set them as a underdog here of 8 points. So I'm going to be willing to lay the number. Just wackadoo 3-point shooting splits for a Sacramento State team that's been awful on defense. They're currently 335th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Idaho's not allowing second and third chances either. They're overall about 178th in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Now, it's an Idaho team that's been able to do a nice job in terms of doing little things, top 100 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis, and for Idaho, they will give up some looks from 3-point range. Right now, they're allowing teams to shoot about 36% from 3. That's 8th in the country. And games played away from home, that actually goes down to 35.3%. And again, with Sacramento State, I just can't believe this split. They shoot 41.1% from 3-point range at home, 26.8% away from home. So that has been all over the place, to say the least. You've had Prophet Johnson be really good for the team with about 18.5 points, 7.5 boards, 4 assists. He shoots 40% from 3. Mikey Williams, he's been the main facilitator for the team, but we haven't seen him in about a month. If he tries to go in this game, he's not going to be 100%. Meanwhile, you've been able to have Mark Levernoff be able to give you about 10.5 points, 7 rebounds per game. He and Johnson are pretty much the lone two guys on the roster. They give you over 3.2 rebounds per game, and for Idaho, just a really good, well put together collective, as you would be able to have a guy, Biko Johnson, step up with about 12.5 points, throws in there 2.5 assists per game. Idaho has been a top 135 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. They're a top 65 team with their 3-point shooting percentage at 36.6%, as you've been able to get about 36.5% out of Colton Mitchell with 13.5 points per game. Throws in there 4 assists. Isaiah Brickner continues to shoot 45% from 3-point range. Brody Woodbury gives you some rough and tumble down low with about 5.5 rebounds per game. And if Idaho needs to cover at the free throw line, they do shoot about 74% of the free throw line. It's an Idaho team that's also been a top 125 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. So with Idaho, made them an 8-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay the number. Do think that you get an up and down game. Sacramento State top 40 team in terms of total possessions per game, made by total 160. So I like the over. 755, 756. You've got Omaha and North Dakota State doing battle for the Summit League tournament. And right now, North Dakota State opens up an 8-point favorite. Throughout this game, it is 146, and I made my line 7.5. So I'm going to be willing to take 8+ here with Omaha. The Omaha offense has been much better here over the last few weeks because they get back their guy in Paul DeBourget. He began his career over at Miami. He's come in, he's given the team 18.5 points, 6.5 boards after he missed the first about 13 or so games of the season. Lance Waddle, Tony Osborne, these are two guys that are back from the NCAA tournament game of a season ago. They've been able to combine for about 25 points per game. Now, Osborne has been dealing with a little bit of injury, but I'm thinking that he's going to be able to go here, and they could certainly use him. He shoots 39% from 3-point range, and then Cameron Thomas has been a little bit of a disappointment, but gives you some versatility with about 5 points, 3.5 rebounds per game. Flip side for North Dakota State, this has been a team that's been a top 75 unit in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. Omaha country average team in terms of taking care of the ball. Omaha's been ghastly on defense. They're outside the top 3 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and they don't put you under duress outside the top 3 in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. But it is an Omaha team that shoots about 35% from 3. North Dakota State was having a rough go of it with their 3-point shooting to begin the season. They're now up to shooting 35.8% from 3-point. That's a top 75 mark in the country. Damari Wheeler-Thomas has been one of your main guys, as he's been able to give you about 14 points per game, shoots high 30s from 3-point range. You've been able to have Andy Stefanovic really be able to step up in a big way in the backcourt with about 5 assists, 9 points per contest. As North Dakota State, they're a top 125 team in terms of taking care of the ball. Country average team, if they need to cover at the free throw line, at 73.3%, and they can be out a little bit more on the inside. This North Dakota State team is outside the top 200 with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. Now, overall, they're about 75th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, so they have the leg up on Omaha there. But with Omaha being able to find sort of a second win with regards to their offense, and with this Omaha team, they have been a team that's been able to do a relatively okay job in terms of executing on the inside as well. They're a top 135 team with their 2-point shooting percentage. With the way that they take care of the ball, I do think that you're going to get a lot of clean possessions and have this game be close enough for late fouls. So I did set my total at a 150.5. I like the over and 8+ here with Omaha. 757, 758. North Dakota is going to be playing against St. Thomas. Currently, this is a game without numbers, but I've got my handicap. Since St. Thomas is a 12-point favorite, I'm willing to lay up to 11.5 with them, 12.5 more, taking the points with North Dakota. And then with the total, I made mine a 152. So 151 or less in on the over, 152.5 for higher, the under end for North Dakota. They do one thing well. They're a top 35 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. Outside of that, there's just not a lot of redeeming qualities with this team. They're not good down low. They're 274th in the country in terms of their own 2-point shooting percentage. St. Thomas is numero uno in all of college basketball. In North Dakota, even with the turnovers, 327th in the country in terms of points allowed on on a per possession basis when they played against St. Thomas at home. In their home game, they allowed St. Thomas to go 16 out of 24 from three-point. You're getting absolutely tattooed in both their 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage defense. North Dakota, as a matter of fact, they're on 48th with regards to their 2-point shooting percentage defense. Now, you do have Eli King, who's been the king of being able to give you multiple steals, 12 points per contest, but it's a North Dakota team that really doesn't shoot it well from three-point range either. They shoot as a collective about 33% outside the top 225 in all of college basketball. Grayson Ullman, 15.5 points per game, shoots about 31% from three. Do have Garrett Anderson shooting 35.5% from the outside, but outside of Eli King and his 5.3 rebounds per game, nobody else gives you 5+ boards per contest, and that's where you're able to hurt St. Thomas. St. Thomas outside the top 340 in terms of percentage of their missed shots that result in an offensive rebound, and they're also a pretty solid team in terms of generating turnovers as well. They're a top 155 team with that regard. They shoot about 37% from three. They've got a guy, Noah Minsale, who doesn't really shoot it well from three, but 20 points, 4.5 boards, 4.5 assists per contest. Isaiah Johnson Agriu has been able to throw in there 10.5 points, 4 boards. Nick Jankowski gives you about 16.5 points, 5 rebounds, shoots 35% from three, and then Carter Bijarke shooting 46% from three is big. It's a St. Thomas team that's been a top 25 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. If you do have trepidation with a large number, they do shoot 68.3% of the free throw line, but even with that, I am willing to lay up to 11.5 here with St. Thomas, 12.5 for more. Take the points with North Dakota, 151.5 for less, and on the over 152.5 for higher, the under 759, 760. You've got Portland and San Francisco doing battle out here in lovely Las Vegas for the WCC tournament. No numbers up on this game, but I've got my handicap. I said San Francisco is a 7.5 point favorite. Want to lay up to 7 with them, 8 or more. I'm going to be willing to take the points with Portland, and then set a total to where 143 or less, and on the over 144 or higher, the under. It's a Portland team that has been able to actually do a nice job on the inside. They're a top 100 team with their 2-point shooting percentage. They are not a great defensive team. They're 15th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. San Francisco has really hit the skids defensively as well. They're overall 205th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. We'll give them this though. In games played away from them, that San Francisco defense does go into the top 110 in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. San Francisco does not generate any turnovers whatsoever. That helps out a Portland team that's been outside the top 310 with regards to their ball security, as Demo George going down with an injury hurt them, but you've been able to have Joel Foxwell being the Foxwell, give you about 6 assists. He throws in there 14 plus points per contest. Shoots at above 30% for three, which is pretty solid for Portland. And for San Francisco, they're about a 34.8% 3-point shooting team. That's about country average. They've been having a little bit of a rough go of it inside, outside the top 200 with their 2-point shooting percentage, but also top 75 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage, and Portland has not been great on the glass, as you've had Jermaine Balsinger-Webb. He's a true 7-footer, be able to give you about 4 to 4.5 rebounds per game, but it is a Portland team that, with regards to defensive rebound percentage, are well outside the top 275 with that regard, and it's a Portland team that also just doesn't have a lot with regards to being able to guard the arc. They're outside the top 300 with regards to opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. You do have Cameron Williams, so give you about 11 points per contest. He's been only able to shoot about 27.5% from 3-point range. Flip side for San Francisco, they've dealt with an injury to Mookie Cook throughout much of the season, but should have him back. 8.5 points, 4.5 boards. He's been able to shoot darn near 40% from three. Tyrone Riley gives you versatility. 11.5 points, 5 rebounds per game, and Riley from 3-point shoots 36.5% from three. And then Juje Wong has been able to give you 8.5 points. He's another guy that shoots 36% from three, and with the just inability of Portland to be able to take care of the ball. So I have to set San Francisco as a mid-tier favorite here. We'll lay up to 7 with San Francisco, 8 or more take the points with Portland, and then 143 or less, and on the over 144 or higher, the under 761, 762. Seattle is going to be taking on Pacific, and let me be specific when I say that there's no numbers up on this game, but I do have my handicap as I did set Seattle as a 2-point underdog. I'm willing to lay up to 1.5 with Pacific, 2.5 or more. I'm going to be willing to take those points with Seattle, and then with regards to the total, 133.5 or less, and on the over 134.5 or higher, the under. I think that this is going to be a slog defensively, even though Seattle's not necessarily a slower team. They're about 166th in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Pacific is playing slow, 300th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and Pacific 98th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis. Seattle's 24th. Seattle not getting anything going on offense. They're outside the top 275 with that regard, but 57th in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. They're a top 35 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, and for Pacific, they've been a top 75 team with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage as well, but here is the undoing for Pacific. They are 349th in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis on offense. Seattle, they're not an amazing offense, but they take a bit of better care of the ball. Top 175 team away from home in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. And for Seattle, you have a go-to guy in Braden Maldonado who's been able to give you about 15 points per game, 2.5 assists per contest. John Suckio, Will Hemboyd, they've got versatility with about 24 points per game, and Hemboyd has been able to give you about 2.5 blocks per contest as well. But the reason why I was still willing to set Pacific as a favorite, even with their turnover issues, it is a Pacific team that at the free throw line, they do shoot 75.5% of the free throw line. That is a top 85 mark in the country. I think that they can come through in that sort of spot, and they shoot it well from three, 36.5% from three-point. Elias Rolfe along TJ Wainwright both shoot 39.5% from three. Rolfe is a 6'7" combo player that gives you about 16.5 points, 7 boards. You got Wainwright give you a little bit more in the backcourt, and then you've been able to have Jaden Clayton do 6.3 assists per game, 8 points per contest. The turnovers are a little bit of an issue, but with Seattle, they're just not really knocking down shots, and if Seattle does need to cover at the free throw line, not like they're the worst team in all of college basketball there, but still 70.1%, that's outside the top 250, so 1.5 to 1.5 here with Pacific, 2.5 or more, take the points with Seattle, and then 133.5 or less in on the over, 134.5 or higher the under, and then this is the OVC final. This is another game without numbers, and this is the last game that we have on the normal Las Vegas betting board before we get the extra game. 763, 764, Tennessee State faces off against Morehead St, and Morehead St is an underdog of 3.5 points, 151 to 152.5 is the total line. I made my line 5.5. I'm going to be willing to lay with Tennessee State. It's a Morehead St team that entered into yesterday 270th in the country in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and for Morehead St, while they do a great job in terms of grabbing second and third chances, they're a top 30 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage. Outside the top 3 in terms of offensive rebound percentage, neither of these teams shoot it well from three. Morehead State 272nd going to yesterday, shooting 32.2% from three-point range, and Tennessee State, they themselves are hovering right around about 264th, but for Tennessee State, if they do find themselves in a pressure spot, they now shoot above 75% at the free throw line. They've been good in terms of generating turnovers, a top 45 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. They themselves have been outside the top 200 in terms of taking care of the ball, but Aaron Namakuro, I think, is the best player in this game, 17.5 points, 5.5 boards, 3 assists, 3 steals per game, and then you've got Dante Harris, who's come in, helped out the backcourt with about 4.5 assists, 11.5 points per game. Travis Harper, he's your main shooter at 86% of the free throw line, 39% from three, 17.5 points per game. Jalen Petrie has been able to throw in their 6.5 rebounds per game. Just a lot of guys that do a great job down low, and it's a Tennessee State team that's very content to pile drive the ball down low. They're a top 25 team in terms of percentage of their field goal attempts that come from inside the three-point line, and Morehead State has been okay in terms of their low post defense. They've been a top 175 team with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, but the second and third chances really do add up. They don't really generate a lot of turnovers. And then you do have John Carroll carrying all the way to 11.5 points, 7.5 rebounds per game. One guy on the roster, though, that gives you over 4.5 rebounds per game, Davion Cunningham, George Marshall. These two guys combined for about 25.5 points per game. Morehead State not bad in terms of their free throw shooting percentage at 73.5%. But again, they leave something to be desired from the outside. It's just a little bit of a mismatch out there in the backcourt. Anur Malak has been able to help out 7.5 points, 4.5 rebounds per game. But in the end, I think that Tennessee State is better down low, and I like the way that they generate turnovers. So made this line 5.5. I'm willing to lay with Tennessee State, and I'm going to be in on the underside by total 147.5. And now we hit a break, and the extra games on the flip side right here on Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hughes Peterson, now a part of the Davidson Family Podcast. And we're back here in lovely Las Vegas for Coast to Coast Hoops with myself, Greg Hughes Peterson, now a part of the Davidson Family Podcast. All right, we went through the normal Las Vegas betting board. We don't have a ton on the extra games board, but how about if we dive in with these extra games board conference tournament games right about now?
The normal betting board picks are complete, but there are some extra games today, so we go into the bonus.
Starts with 306-501, 306-502. No numbers up on this game as Winthrop is going to be playing as High Point. This is from the great state of Tennessee. I've got my handicap. I set High Point as a 6-point favorite. I'm going to be willing to lay up to 5.5 with them, 6.5 or more. Take the points with Winthrop, and then I set a total of a 162. So 161 for less in on the over, 162.5 for higher the under. Winthrop actually gave High Point some good tussles during the regular season. Lost by 2 in the game at High Point. In the first game, they actually won outright. I will say High Point in that game, I believe, was without Cameron Fletcher, who at their time was their top scorer. He's been now passed up by Terry Anderson, and Rob Merton has been coming off the bench a little bit more since coming off of injury, and it's a High Point team that does a supreme job in terms of winning the turnover battle. They're a top 20 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis on offense, top 20 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis on defense, and they're a top 15 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Both of these teams play fast, not necessarily warp speed fast, but still High Point 63rd in the country in terms of total possessions per game. Winthrop is 35th, and for Winthrop, man, they had to pull off 12 points in the final 29 seconds to be able to survive and advance. You do have to wonder if that takes a little bit of wind out of their sails, and this is a Winthrop team that has been able to do a relatively solid job in terms of guarding the perimeter. They're little bit more vulnerable on the inside, and that hurts them because it's a high point team that has been down low a top 30 team with regards to our 2-point shooting percentage. You do have Logan Duncombe, 18.5 points, 9 boards with Kareem Rozier. He shoots about 37% from 3-point, 13 points per game. Cody Cluett has been a 40+% 3-point shooter as well, about 13.5 points per contest. And with regards to this Winthrop team, they've been great in terms of getting to the free throw line, top 10 team in terms of free throw attempts on a per possession basis. They will put you at the free throw line, and it's a high point team that has been shooting about 74.5% at the free throw line. They're also a top 10 team in terms of free throw attempts on a per possession and a per game basis. So I do think that for High Point, they do find a way to be able to persevere with winning that turnover battle. 1 up to 5.5 with High Point, 6.5 or more to get the points with Winthrop, and then a 161.5 or less, and on the over 162.5 for higher, the under 306.503, 306.504. You've got UNC Asheville playing against Bradford. No numbers up on this game, but made Asheville the 1-point favorite. I anticipate them being the underdog, and if they are, I'll take them on the money line. Meanwhile, if you're getting anything more than a point with Bradford, looking at them, and then set a total of 151, 150.5 or less, and on the over 151.5 or higher, the under. You've got an Asheville team that has slowed down quite a bit this season in terms of total possessions per game, 251st. Bradford is just absolutely gunning it. They are currently 14th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and Bradford has been neither here nor there with their offense. Overall, 185th in the country in terms of points per possession, but they average 16 points fewer per 100 possessions away from home rather than at home. Asheville's actually averaging 2.5 points more per 100 possessions when they're away from home rather than at home. I think that they're going to exploit a Bradford defense that's really been giving it up from three. They're allowing teams to shoot 35.3% from three, 263rd in all of college basketball. Asheville, they are allowing teams to shoot just 30.6% from three-point range in a road/intracourt venue, and that is a top 100 mark in all of college basketball with Toya Solomon. He's been very rock solid for the Asheville team, 16.7 boards, and he's been able to shoot in the high 30s from three-points. You've got an Asheville bunch that also has Justin Wright and Cameron Taylor in the backcourt. They've been able to combine for about 35 points per game. Wright has been Mr. Wright, shooting 37% from three-point range, and with Asheville, you do have to have trepidation with the fact that they shoot 68.5% at the free throw line, but they've been a top 225 team with regards to their 2-point shooting percentage, not necessarily executing the best on the inside, but Radford a little bit stronger with their interior defense rather than their exterior defense. And for Radford, this has been a team that's shot about 34.5% from three, country average. Have a pair of guys that used to be in the ACC in the backcourt. Del Jones comes over from Clemson, 17 points. He shoots about 31% from three, and then Dennis Parker has been a 39% three-point shooter, 18.5 points per game. You've been able to get some relatively good production as well out of Jalen Johnson. He throws in their pair of steals per contest. Radford has been a top 100 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, but they themselves outside the top 250 with their own ball security with UNC Asheville. They've had a tough time as well, right around about 250th with themselves in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, but with this Asheville bunch are also top 200 team with regards to rebound percentage, and I do think that for Asheville, the way that they're able to shoot from three-point range away from home should make them the very small favorite. I'm willing to take Asheville on the money line as an underdog. If you're getting 1.5 plus with Radford, willing to take those points, and then 150.5 or less in on the over 151.5 or higher. The under 306.505, 306.506. You've got Florida Gulf Coast. They're going to be playing against Central Arkansas right now. Seeing an opener of Central Arkansas being a 6-point favorite. That total is 146. And with Central Arkansas, I did set them as a favorite here of 8 points, so I'm going to be willing to lay that number. It's a Central Arkansas team that has been a top 55 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, and it's a Florida Gulf Coast team that can be had from the outside. With Florida Gulf Coast, they become a country average 3-point shooting team after they were hot to begin the season. They're 275th in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. Now, Central Arkansas is weak down low. They're about 300th in the country in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, and they themselves are allowing opponents to shoot 35.6% from 3-point range. So I did think they were going to get good open looks from three. I set my total of 148. I like the over, especially with Central Arkansas playing at a brisk pace. 115th in terms of total possessions per game. Florida Gulf Coast, they're more around 94, so you're going to be able to get some tempo in this game. With Central Arkansas, though, I do like the fact that Cameron Hunter is, in my opinion, the best player in this game. 19.5 points, 4.5 boards, shoots about 35% from three. It's a Central Arkansas team that doesn't shoot it quite the same from 3-point range when they're away from home rather than at home, but they're a team that ranks in the top 30 in terms of percentage of their field goal attempts that come from three. And Central Arkansas has been a top 75 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage. They're a top 40 team in terms of fewest free throw attempts allowed on a per possession basis. And for Florida Gulf Coast, you've got J.R. Kaczynski. He comes over from Notre Dame. He's been able to give the team 16 points, right around about 7 boards, and from 3-point range, he's been able to shoot 33% from three. You've got Isaiah Malone on a very low volume, actually shooting 45% from three. He throws in there a pair of blocks, 10.5 points per contest. Jordan Ellerby, he's been able to throw in there about 13.5 points per game, but it is a team that is also outside the top 250 with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. For Florida Gulf Coast, they themselves have been a top 125 team in terms of defensive rebound percentage, but with Florida Gulf Coast, we've really seen the 3-point shooting take a nosedive for them, and with them giving it up from three, do think that Central Arkansas gets a job done. I'm going to be willing to lay with Central Arkansas, made them an 8-point favorite, and at a 146 like the over, semi-total 148, 306-508, 306-507, 306-508. Austin Peay and Queens NC are doing battle from the great state of Florida. No numbers up on this game, but I've got my handicap. I made Austin Peay the 4.5 point favorites. I'm willing to lay up to 4 with them. 5 or more, I'm going to be willing to take the points with Queens NC. And with regards to this total, set mine at a 160.5. So 160 or less in on the over, 161 or higher the under. You've got a Queens NC team that has been a really good offensive team, top 50 team in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. Not quite the same offensive team when they're away from home, though. That does take quite a bit of a dive with Queens NC. They are averaging right around about 18.5 points fewer per 100 possessions away from home rather than at home. And for Austin Peay, they are a team that as well is averaging about 16.5 points fewer per 100 possessions away from home rather than at home. It's a Queens NC team that's looking to play quite up tempo, but not necessarily like warp speed. Austin Peay 117th in terms of total possessions per game. Queens NC is 84th, but Austin Peay in games played away from home has been a really supreme defense, top 65 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, thanks to being a really good team in terms of generating turnovers. Austin Peay in games played away from home, they're a top 85 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. They should be able to do a pretty solid job down low, as you've got Rashad Marshall, who's been able to step up, give the team 15 points, 6.5 rebounds per game. Colin Parker has been able to give you 18 points, 6 boards, 3 assists. For an Austin Peay team that overall shoots 36.5% from 3-pointers, you're a top 100 team in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage as well. And Austin Peay does value the ball themselves, top 125 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. Now Queens has been able to do a good job of keeping possessions clean, top 100 team in terms of fewest turnovers on a per possession basis. With Queens, they're really good on the inside. They're a top 30 team with their 2-point shooting percentage, shoot 35.5% from 3, hovering right around about 100th in the country. Yov Berman has not been able to find it from 3, but has been able to give you 13 points per game, and just have a really good collective of guys, 6 different guys that give you double figures, including Carson Schwieger, who's been able to give you about 9 points per contest. He shoots 41% from 3. Avante Parker has versatility, 11.5 points, a block, 5 rebounds, shoots 45.5% from 3-point range. But I do think that in this ordeal, Austin Peay is going to be able to come up with some turnovers. I do think that their defense is going to be able to reign a little bit more supreme in this spot, and I do think that you get an up and down game. 160 or less and on the over, 161 or higher the under. Want to lay up to 4 here with Austin Peay, 5 or more. I'm taking those points with Queens NC. 306-509, 306-510. It's Mercyhurst, and they're going to be playing us to Stonewall. For some reason, the Northeast Conference tournament games don't have numbers, but I've got my handicap with Mercyhurst, set them as a 7.5 point favorite, so I'm going to be willing to lay up to 7 with them. 8 or more, I'm going to be willing to take the points with Stonewall. And with regards to this total, I made mine a 124.5, 124 or less in on the over, 125.5 or higher the under. And with this Stonewall team, they just have not been able to do a good job in terms of turnover battle. They are outside the top 330 in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis, outside the top 320 in terms of ball security. With Stonewall, not necessarily the slowest team in the world, 244th in terms of total possessions per game. Mercyhurst is 330th, and it's a Mercyhurst team that's been solid in terms of generating turnovers. I'm not going to call them like amazing, but they are a top 120 team in terms of overall points allowed on a per possession basis, and they're 50th in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. They're also good down low with Kadir Martin being able to give you double figures, 6.5 boards, and he throws in there about 2.5 blocks per game. For Stonewall, they're going to try to stand up down low with Ravon Tudyk, be able to give you 7 points, 8 rebounds per game, and then you've got Raymond Espinal Guzman, who has come over from Sacred Heart, be able to give the team 5 rebounds per game. All of a sudden, you've gotten some great scoring out of Devontae Hackett as well. He had a 40-point game a few weeks ago against St. Francis, Pennsylvania, another 30-point game against Lemoyne. Mercyhurst held them down in his last 4 games. The game against Mercyhurst is the lone one in which he was held below 26 points. So, guy's been on a bit of a tear, shoots 34.5% from 3-point range, and Stonewall as a whole has been able to do a pretty solid job in terms of finding a little bit more 3-point shooting, and they're just bad on the inside. They're outside the top 350 with their own 2-point shooting percentage. We'll say they're a top 50 team with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. Mercyhurst, not a team that's going to go into flamethrower mode from 3. They shoot about 32.5% from 3. That's outside the top 250 in the country. But Bernie Blunt, Jake Lelleman, they combine for about 31.5 points per game between the two of them. They shoot 37% from 3, 5.5 assists per game. And then you've got Martin doing his thing down low. Deshaun Jackson has coming off the bench. He's been able to give you about 3 assists per game. And for Mercyhurst, they do such a good job in terms of being able to take care of the ball themselves. Top 50 team in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis. So do feel like they should be the favorite in this ordeal of 7.5 points. 1 to lay up to 7 with Mercyhurst. 8 or more taking the points with Stonewall. 124 or less, like the over. 125 or higher the under. 36-5-11, 36-5-12. Wagner is going to be on the road against Long Island. I said Wagner as a 10.5 point dog. I need 11 plus to be able to take a shot on them. 10 or less, 1 to lay with Long Island. And then with this total, 140 or less in on the over. 141 or higher the under. Really recognize that Wagner, not an up-tempo team in terms of total possessions per game, 292nd, but it is a Wagner team that isn't quite the same defensively as they have been in the past. Wagner not going to put you under duress, 297th in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. That very much helps out a Long Island team, of which their main kryptonite has been turnovers. So outside the top 320 in terms of ball security, Wagner in games played away from home, they allow teams to shoot 37.2% from 3 points, and it's an LIU team that has been pretty good with their perimeter defense. They are 79th in the country, with teams shooting only about 32% from three-point range, and the forte of this Wagner team has been the way that they've gone bombs away from three-point range. Right now for Wagner, they are 28th in the country. They shoot 37.4% from three. That goes up to 38.4 away from home, and that's despite the fact that their main scorer has really not been able to give you any sort of three-point shooting whatsoever. As right now, Nick Jones is a lone guy that gives you double figures, 14 points per game. He only shoots 28% from three, but then you got someone like Travis Gray, who shoots 37% from three, 8.8 points per game. Benio Basile has been able to give you about 8.5 points per contest. You've had just a lot of interesting mixers and shakers for this Wagner team, and they've been able to do an okay job on the glass. It's a Wagner team that is a top 125 team with regards to our overall rebound percentage. For Long Island, this team has been pretty incredible in terms of giving themselves second and third chances, and you've got a trio of guys that can give you over 13 points per game, despite the fact that it's just mainly guards with this team. LIU, they grab about 36% of their missed shots as an offensive rebound in their home games. That is a top 35 mark in all of college basketball. You've got Greg Gecko Gordon, who's been able to step up 13.5 points, 5.5 boards, 3 assists per contest. Malachi Davis, 14 points, 3.5 boards, 3.5 assists. And then Jamal Fuller is your main three-point shooter at 44%, 16 points per game. Now, Long Island, if they need to cover at the free throw line, they do shoot 67% of the free throw line. That is a big, giant issue for them, but they've been able to do a relatively solid job in terms of holding up down low. They've been a top 225 team with their own 2-point shooting percentage as well, and they're a top 100 team in terms of generating turnovers as well. So 10 or less, willing to lay with Long Island, 11 or more, taking the points with Wagner, 140 or less, like the over, 141 or higher, the under, and we head to the Northeast Conference Tournament. Home court environments for this: 3 of 6-5-13, 3 of 6-5-14. You've got New Hampshire. They're going to be on the road against UMBC. UMBC, 12.5 point favorites. Total on this game, 137.5 in with UMBC. I just set them as a favorite of 12.5 points. Right now, I'm seeing a 12 out there. I'm going to be willing to lay up to 12 with UMBC. They've been really good in terms of not allowing second and third chances. They're a top 25 team with regards to defensive rebound percentage, not grabbing any sort of second and third chances for themselves. 338th with regards to offensive rebound percentage, but this team is able to light you up from three-point range. It's a UMBC team that right now is shooting about 35% from three. That's a top 130 mark in the country. New Hampshire, 336. That dips 29.8% with their three-point shooting away from home. Now for New Hampshire, you do have a trio of guys that are able to give you double figures, including 8 rebounds at 11 points per game out of Belial El-Shakiri. John Robinson has been able to be one of the main guys in the backcourt, 10.5 points, 2.3 assists per game, and then Jack Graham, 11 points per game. But along with the bad three-point shooting, New Hampshire, they're outside the top 300 with their own 2-point shooting percentage, outside the top 250 with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. To the credit of New Hampshire, they've been a top 125 team in terms of the defensive rebound percentage, but not going to put you under too much stress. And if they get sent to the free throw line, they shoot 66.5% of the free throw line. That is a bottom 20 mark in all of college basketball. Meanwhile, you've got a UMBC group that they've been able to do a really good job with their backcourt, with DJ Armstrong, Ace Valentine combining for about 23.5 points per game between the two of them. They shoot 39.5% from three. Jujel Lyle King has been able to give you 14 points, 3.5 boards per contest. Josh Odowandu is pretty much a lone guy that gives you over 5 rebounds per game, along with Jose Roberto Tachuan, who's been able to give you about 6.5 points, 5.4 rebounds per game. But these two guys have been able to do a nice job making sure that teams don't grab a lot of second and third chances, and they become much more set down low. Top 130 team with their own 2-point shooting percentage, a top 100 team with regards to opponents' 2-point shooting percentage. I think that allows this UMBC team to be able to get the job done. We'll only lay up to 12 with UMBC, and I did set my total here at a 136.5, 137 plus in on the under. 3 of 6-5-15, 3 of 6-5-16. Albany is going to be on the road against UMass Lowell. Lowell is a 2.5 point favorite. Total on this game, 148.5 to 149.5. I am in on the under. I set my total at a 142.5. Albany's just not looking to push any sort of tempo whatsoever. They are 320th in the country in terms of total possessions per game, and both of these teams just are not doing the little things very well, as you've got a Albany team that is outside the top 330 with their free throw shooting percentage. In terms of turnovers on a per possession basis on offense, they are 300th. UMass Lowell's not taking care of the ball either, 269th in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis, 358th with their free throw shooting percentage. Despite that, I did still make them a favorite of 4.5 points. I'm still going to be willing to lay with them because they don't give up second and third chances when they're at home. This is a team that's allowing teams to grab 20.1% of their misses as an offensive rebound in their home games. That is 10th in the country, with Austin Green leading the way, 13.8 rebounds per game. I know Motas has really been able to come on strong as their top scorer, 15 points, 5 boards. Doesn't necessarily bomb it well from three, but Xavier Spencer, Theory Updale, they combine to shoot about 35.5% per three-point range between the two of them. You're getting about 21.5 points per contest. And then on the flip side for Albany, you are actually going to have probably the best overall scorer in this game, as you've had Amir Lindsay step up for about 17.5 points, gives the team 5 assists per contest. contest, but it's an Albany team that just is not doing the little things well. They've been a top 125 team with their 2-point shooting percentage. In terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, they're outside the top 200 with that regard. They also don't get to the free throw line at all, so that actually helps out with the fact that they're so bad with their free throw shooting percentage. Okay, Kachu Okeke down low has been able to give you 2 blocks, 7 boards, 10.5 points per game. Albany's not been the world's worst team on the boards themselves. They're a top 175 team with regards to rebound percentage, but with having so many injuries, Zach Matalu has been dealing with injury. You've got Jaden Kempson. He's been able to give you 10 points per game. He's been a little bit banged up. We haven't seen him over the last few weeks, and if he does play in this game, he's not going to be fully at 100%. I do think that allows UMass Lowell to get the job done. Semi line at 4.5. I'm willing to lay up to 4 with Lowell, and semi total 142.5. So I'm in on this total under as well. 306-517, 306-518. Bryant is on the road against Vermont. Vermont is finding themselves as a very sizable favorite here of 13 to 13.5 points. 133.5 is the total line with Vermont. I set them as a 13.5 point favorite. I'm going to be one to lay the 13. Bryant, they entered in the week out of 365 Division I teams, 365th in terms of points scored on a per possession basis away from them. I actually like what Timothy Radulski brings to the table. He gives you about 13 points, 4.5 boards per contest. Keegan Harvey has been able to throw in there about 10.5 points. He had 6'11", has actually give you about 37% 3-point shooting as well, so that helps out the team, but they're just not doing anything well. I was about to say little things, but anyway thing, but they are a top 175 team in terms of opponents' 2-point shooting percentage, but they're outside the top 275 in terms of opponents' 3-point shooting percentage. They themselves are outside the top 330 with their own 3-point shooting percentage. They're outside the top 225 in terms of rebound percentage, and Vermont, top 5 team in the country in terms of defensive rebound percentage. They do not allow second and third chances, and Bryant just getting tattooed in the turnover battle. They're outside the top 325 in terms of turnovers on a per possession basis on offense, and outside the top 325 in terms of generating those turnovers on defense. Meanwhile, for Vermont, you've got the TJs. TJ Hurley, 14.5 points, 3.5 boards. He's been able to shoot 38% per 3. TJ Long has been able to give you about 12.5 points. He only shoots about 31% per 3, but does a good job hauling in there about 5 rebounds per game. And then Gussie Alden, he shoots 37.5% per 3 at about 6'7", 17 points per game. It's a Vermont team that has been getting gashed a little bit from 3-point range. The line teams to shoot 35% per 3, but again, it's a Bryant team that just is not knocking down their outside shots. In games played away from home, they shoot 27.4% per 3. It's a Vermont offense that always is typically a little bit better at home rather than away from home. In this case, they only shoot 33.3% from 3-point range at home compared to 34% away from home, but it's still a pretty efficient offense in terms of points scored on a per possession basis. They're a top 120 team. Do you think that they get the job done here? And just don't think that Bryant does their part with the total. Like the under sub, I told 131.5 and one to lay up to 13 with Vermont, and wrap things up with 306-519, 306-520. Maine is going to be on the road against NJIT. NJIT 3.5 to 4-point favorites on scheme, 131 to 132.5, and I did somebody told 128. I like the under for Maine, 360th in the country in terms of total possessions per game while playing at a very slow tempo in terms of total possessions per game, 342nd. Now, Maine is not the world's worst defense in the world. They've been a top 125 team in terms of turnovers generated on a per possession basis. They do a pretty solid job along the perimeter, and overall in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, 105th in all of college basketball. NJIT, they had a rough start to the season on defense. They become a top 205 team in terms of points allowed on a per possession basis, and they're going to have an edge down low, which typically they don't have. NJIT 317th in terms of overall rebound percentage. Maine is just 363rd. They don't have a single guy on the roster other than TJ Beal that really gives you much of anything down low. Beal is also your lone double-figure scorers. Right now, he's supplying for the team about 12 points, 4.3 rebounds per game, and then you've got Kellen Steele, who's been able to give you 4.5 rebounds per game. Those are the lone 2 guys on the roster that give you over 3.9 rebounds per game, as Ace Flag is not Ben Cooper, 6.5 points, 3.5 rebounds per game for Maine. They shoot just 31.8% per 3. Actually a top 225 team with their 2-point shooting percentage, but they don't want to go to the free throw line. They shoot 64.1% of the charity stripe. That is outside the top 350 in all of college basketball, outside the top 275 in terms of taking care of the ball. And for this NJIT team, they've been okay in terms of generating turnovers, just here outside the top 200 with that regard. They've been a top 200 team with regards to opponents' 2-point and 3-point shooting percentage. Now, NJIT, they themselves are outside the top 290 in terms of points per possession, but Sebastian Robinson, their top scorer with about 14.5 points per game, dealt with injury towards the beginning part of the season. In conference play, that's gone up to 17 points per game. Melvin Ikong-Boli was dealing with injury towards the beginning part of the season, and he's made their front line much better. He gives you a block, 5.5 boards, 8 points per game, so they've been much better with regards to rebounding here in conference play. As a result, David Bolden is able to give you 33% 3-point shooting, 12 points per game, and flat out, I do think that NJIT does a great job on their home floor, taking it to a Maine team that just has not been able to give you any offense whatsoever. So I'm on line at 8. I'm willing to lay with NJIT, and I'm in on the under. So I told 128, and that'll wrap things up for the Saturday edition of Coast to Coast Hoops, part of the VSiN family of podcasts. If you do like what you're hearing from this fine podcast, Coast to Coast Hoops, you're able to subscribe wherever your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, and TuneIn. If you have a question, comment, segment idea, what have you for this podcast, you have one or two ways we offer those in. First one is my Twitter/X timeline at @GUNet_81. Keep in mind, letters CM, they mean does not matter, so per usual, please do send these into the timeline. And the other way is find an Apple Podcast review. If you rate this podcast 5 stars, it is very much appreciated. From there, you're able to fire in whatever you'd like to hear on this podcast via that 5-star review, and I'm coming at you guys every single day with picks and analysis on every game, every day, so I'll be back with you once again tomorrow. Thank you.